Welcome to Down the Barrel Podcast with Jimmy and Dino. Get ready to dive into the wild world of Minnesota hunting, trapping, and wildlife. We'll be chatting with some folks who protect, manage, and promote the great outdoors. But don't worry, we'll also have some laughs as we chat about guns, whiskey, and anything else that catches our eye. So grab a drink, sit back, and get ready for a good time. Down the Barrel Podcast is brought to you by the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association
and Wolf.Report. Wolf.Report, a platform dedicated to elevating the voices of Minnesota hunters, trappers, and outdoor enthusiasts. Join us in advocating for responsible wolf management in Minnesota. Share your reports, photos, and stories, and together we will ensure that they are seen by all.
The Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, protecting the future of deer and deer hunting through habitat, education, advocacy, and legislation.
I'm Jimmy.
And I'm Dino.
Today, we're here with Tom Gable from Voyageurs Wolf Project. Thanks for coming over, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Yeah, it'll be a pleasure. And then we also have Jared with MDHA.
Absolutely.
I'm back.
You're
Awesome.
back.
Good to be here.
Jared lives.
I don't think he ever leaves. Like
I don't
us.
think he does.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a pretty sweet studio other than the yellow paint. But
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. We need a few more decorations, but we're getting there.
we're getting there.
Yeah, we're
I've
working
got
on
the
it.
painters coming in next week.
What color are we going with?
I don't know yet.
Maybe we could put a little more thought into it, Jared.
I just know they're coming.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, Tom, thanks for coming down.
Sure,
and,
absolutely.
And hanging out with us for a little bit.
Where'd you come from?
Just south of Voyageurs National Park.
Okay.
So if you know where Orr, Minnesota is,
I do.
Some people do, some people don't. But yeah, that's where I live, just north of Orr.
Yeah, I'm from Togo, so I know where Orr is.
Big, beautiful town.
Big, beautiful town. Hey, they got one of the best breakfast places in that town.
T. Patton's, the Big Donut.
The Big Donut place.
Yes.
They make some pretty good donuts there, don't they?
man.
I love eating that place. And then they have the outside of town, they had that awesome restaurant that we often stop at. We had
Yes.
before.
The Dam.
The Dam.
Yeah,
Yeah.
damn.
They
Yeah.
make some good food.
Oh, they've got good food there.
Yeah, every time I go to the Boundary Waters, I stop in both those places.
Yeah, and we've stopped there quite a bit. Come back from Namakan.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
we do the boat in.
Yep.
Typically, we've been staying close to Kettle Falls.
Oh, that's a super nice area up there.
I love Kettle Falls.
It's really nice.
Yeah, that's a really cool bar restaurant.
Have you had the
Everything.
pinkies there?
Oh, my
Yes.
God. Have we ever?
We've had
It's dangerous.
we've had too many pinkies.
Too
there.
many pinkies.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of people have. They're
Yeah.
pretty addicting, especially
I mean-
on those hot days. It's like 90 degrees, and you could
yeah.
just sit there and one goes down, two
We
goes
actually
down.
have done that.
Yes, we have.
I feel like I'm
Yep.
missing out on something.
Yeah,
you
dude,
you
yeah,
are
gotta
honestly. You
go,
boat
man.
out there, and it's great.
You know what's great about the pinkies? They make the floor level.
I think they make
That's
you
right.
walk level. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
If you haven't been
awesome.
to Jared, the floor is definitely not level.
I'll have to
It's
stop
at
by
like a
next time
30-degree
up there.
angle.
Yeah, you have to look it up. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool. The
a cool
Falls
place.
Bar. No, Kettle Falls.
Kettle Falls,
Yeah,
yep.
Kettle Falls Bar.
And they got good food there, too.
Yeah, really good food.
And it's even better after you had a couple pinkies.
You know, it helps. But pinkies is what? That's like vodka, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure it's vodka and like country time lemonade or something.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty simple, but
Yeah.
it just hits the spot,
Oh,
you know?
Oh, it's so good.
It sneaks up on you too.
It does.
Yeah.
Especially when you have 3-4 of them.
Yeah.
We just lost count, honestly.
Right.
Yep.
And then she gave us the bill and was like, wow.
Yeah, they're not
Proud of
cheap.
those things. No, they were good. So, yeah, we know where Orr is, obviously.
Yeah.
So, whereabouts in Orr? You live in town, outside of town?
I don't want to disclose exactly
Don't give
where I
your
live.
address. Yeah, exactly. Don't give
just
your
for
address.
certain. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I live north of Orr, out kind of towards Johnson Lake, if you know where that's at. It's basically down a dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. And that's
Okay.
about as specific as I want to be.
Right?
Yeah, don't.
Yeah.
But it's out there in the middle of nowhere, which is what I like.
So, history of yourself,
Sure.
you know.
Absolutely. So I'm not originally from Minnesota. I'm from Michigan. I ended up in Voyageurs because that's where I started doing my master's work. So when I started doing my master's at Northern Michigan University, my thesis project was supposed to be on beavers and voyageurs. And I was told I could study anything I wanted to as long as it dealt with beavers and was in Voyageurs. And so I thought that sounds pretty interesting. Beavers are pretty cool. And when I showed up, they had started doing some really basic wolf monitoring at that time in the park because wolves had been delisted. One of the times they had been delisted was in 2012. So the park had started trying to understand how many wolves were in the park, how big are the territories, how big are the packs. And so I thought, well, there'd been previous work that suggested wolves eat a lot of beavers in that area in the summertime. Most research on wolves didn't really look at wolf predation on beavers, in part because it's really tough to study and because most people don't really care that much if wolves are eating beavers. In fact, some people are probably happy they're eating beavers. And so I proposed, well, why don't we look at wolf-beaver interactions because no one's really looked at it, and that sounds kind of interesting. And my advisors thought that was fantastic. And that's kind of what I did. So that's how I ended up in Minnesota initially. The first year of my graduate work was 2015, or at least my first full summer of research. And that was really kind of the start of the Voyageurs Wolf Project, because not only did we look at wolf-beaver interactions, but it really spawned a lot larger sort of project where we started looking at all sorts of stuff with wolf ecology in the summertime. And I got kind of hooked when I showed up. I was like, this is pretty cool work. Initially, that was not my plan. I was going to come to Minnesota somewhat begrudgingly. I wanted to go out west. I wanted to do something where it was really charismatic. A couple summers before that, I had worked in the Tetons and helped out with the wolf project there. And I was like, this is really awesome. There's no bugs. The summer is really nice. You come to Minnesota, it's buggy, it's kind of humid, and you can't see anything during the summer. But I got really interested in the research. And so I was like, I want to stick around and do this. And so to make a long story really short, we were able to get funding. I finished my master's, continued on doing that research, working for the Park Service for a year. And then I started a PhD, did that for a couple more years, finished that, and then have been working as a researcher since then to kind of keep the project going. And all through this time, I've been kind of bouncing around back and forth between, going to university to take courses, finishing my graduate work, also being up in Voyageurs as much as I can. And now for the past 4 years or so, I've been up there pretty much full time, but moving around a little bit from year to year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So how did it turn into a website?
Oh, that's a great question. So the project was sort of this really gradual evolution, I think you could say. Like when we first did it, it was like 2015. That was really the start of the work that we still do today. And that was just kind of like, this is awesome. Like, let's just try to figure out and get as much data as we can. We didn't really know why we were doing it per se, other than we could collect it and maybe it'll be useful. But then as time went on and we kept doing it year after year, I was like, well, this is becoming a bit more formalized. We're kind of honing in on the questions we want to answer, the kind of data we want to collect. And then also in 2018, which is when we kind of coined the term the Voyageurs Wolf Project and launched our website, we decided to make a really concerted effort to do a lot more outreach and to share our work. And some of that came from the fact that we were already communicating with a lot of private landowners. So we work with about 160 private landowners in our area. Wow. And we're sharing a lot of information with them. And they were constantly kind of contacting us and saying, hey, can you tell me about the wolves in your area? And certainly we did that. But we thought, hey, there's a lot of interest in what we're doing. Can we share that more broadly with folks? And I think there is generally a sentiment among a lot of the public that there was wolf research going on in the state, and let's say just beyond the state in other places too. And the public didn't get a lot of insight into what was going on. It was kind of like, oh, there's this study going on. And then 3 to 4 years later, you might read the summary of what that study found. But you don't really have access, right, to the people doing that, at least not immediately. You might be able to send the DNR an email and get a response, something, but you don't have like immediate access to what they might be seeing. Yeah. And so we thought, well, we can kind of fill that niche in some sense where we can take our work and we can share it because we're not part of an agency. We don't have restrictions on what we can share necessarily, as long as we're using good judgment and we're not, giving away den sites where people can go, trek in or do something that they shouldn't be doing. We can kind of share what we want. And so that's what we really started doing in 2018. That's when we launched our Facebook page, website, other social media and things like that. And then that really kind of accelerated everything at that point because we quickly started getting a large following, which then just started this sort of snowball effect where we started getting a lot more people interested, which helped us get more funding, which helped us keep the work going. And that's just continued till today, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think one of the things that really caught my eye, and I don't know when you guys released it, but was the maps of the wolf packs. That really caught my eye. I thought that was amazing. Just to see that, they like bounce off each other.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that map was actually probably like the third or fourth thing we ever posted on social media. And that really, like, all of a sudden we went from like, a couple hundred people were following us on like Facebook to like 5,000, right? And like in a month maybe, right? And then it just kept going up because that map keeps recirculating all over the place. We weren't smart enough at the time to actually put our name on the map, right? Because we didn't think at that time, right? You don't think like someone's going to take it. But there's so many instances. If you Google like Wolfpack map, you'll find instances where it's gone crazy, more viral than it went on our own social media, but from people who haven't credited us and they made it a meme or who knows what. And every year or so, it's like we get someone who's following us says, oh, there's this social media account that shared your map. And it's like, but it doesn't have our name. So we're like, well, that's something we learned quickly of like, if you're going to share something that's going to get spread, make sure you've got your logo or something on it.
I did share it today, but I did put your logo on it.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate that.
So you see, I was thinking to add, but no, I thought that was great. I mean, we used to talk about that map all the time.
Yeah, we did. Well, that was kind of what even spurred Wolf Report in a way.
Right.
A little bit was like, okay, so, Voyageurs have got this program going.
Right.
And obviously they track the wolves in the park and everything. So, but we all know that there's wolves outside.
Sure, absolutely.
And a lot more than what everybody thinks. So that was where, Wolf Report kind of started.
We should let hunters give us some pictures and some data too.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think, especially with trail camera data in particular, right, it's a great way. One of the problems before trail cameras, right, is people could report sightings, but it's always hard to verify what they saw, how many they saw. Was it a wolf? Was it a coyote, et cetera? Yeah. Trail cameras they're very helpful because obviously you can review the evidence and say, yeah, that's clearly a wolf. It's kind of like the cougar or bobcat, right? What did you see, right? Everyone sees the cougar. But I think I think ways that can incorporate that kind of information is obviously super useful for a variety of things. And we do that in our area on a very small scale. And I think I told Jared this is for a long time, we have a lot of landowners who have trail cameras and they send us, photos they get. Right. And we've wanted for a long time to do something that would be equivalent to what you did with Wolf Report, where we basically could send landowners a link that's like, hey, if you find a wolf or you get some photos of wolf, put it on, just submit it to our website, show where it was. Right. And we can then use that information. And we do something like that's a lot more rudimentary, basically. Someone emails us and then we kind of mark on a map.
I thought that's what we were doing. I thought I was rudimentary. You guys have all the GPS tracking stuff.
No, I don't know how to do web design at all. So, I can do basic web design, but that was one of those things where I sat down like, how much time would it take me to figure out how to put a map on our website? And I was like, it's not worth it. I'll just keep it on myself on Google Earth or something.
I bet we know a guy.
We do know a guy.
That's true. So I thought that was pretty cool way to, because I think those sort of things, the easier it can be to kind of collate this kind of information is super helpful. Right. Yeah. And it also just helps to see it. Like, I think it's cool looking at the map of information that's presented on Wolf Report. Yep. I think I told Jared this one. It's like, it's kind of cool to see the distribution of photos and to kind of see where the line is, right, where it stops, where you stop seeing people saying, oh, I saw this. And I think it's a cool thing. And we have landowners in our area, actually someone who's submitted a couple of photos to Wolf Report.
I won't say his name, but I know
him. Yeah. And that's super cool. Like, and he told me
Ash Lake area.
Yeah. So I think that's a cool initiative.
Yeah. I know exactly who you're talking about because he told me you had identified the wolves.
Yeah.
On his property.
Yep. We know who they are. Mm-hmm. And that's the case with most of the wolves that people get on cameras in our area. We generally know who they are, or roughly speaking, like who they might be in a pack. And part of that is because we have so many cameras out ourselves that we know which wolves are in a pack's territory. What do they look like? How old are they? We've been some of them studying for multiple years, and then some of them are new. And then sometimes we get, the blurry nights phone photos. Well, people are like, you know what wolf this is? It's like, I have no idea.
That's a coyote.
You don't even know what it is, right? But when people get daytime photos, we can oftentimes tell them like, yeah, it was this wolf. And especially if it's collared, what we often do is then send a map of like, oh yeah, that wolf was on your property at this time, and it matches up with the trail camera photo and things like that. And I think we think that's fun to do because if I was a landowner, I would want to know that personally. Right. And I think most people are also blown away when they see the maps, like of how it's really hard to imagine how far wolves actually travel. Right. because it's easy to be like, oh yeah, I know they go a long ways. But then when you see it in a map and you know an area well, and you say, like, wow, that's a long ways.
Right.
Like if I had to walk that distance, it would take me a long time.
Weeks.
So, and so I think that's fun too, because it gives people a sense of scale of how big territories can be and how much ground wolves can cover.
Absolutely. Yeah, I watched that seminar you did last night.
Okay.
This morning, actually. And I know you had some kind of animation on there. I forget which wolf it was, but just to see how far that thing traveled was amazing.
Oh, yeah. And that's what they do all the time. And the funny thing that's interesting is in Minnesota, actually, wolves have relatively small territories. Like if you looked at wolves across the world, basically, we're on the very bottom end of territory size. You got it. So our average territory is in our area about 100 square kilometers. You get up to the Arctic, they're 1,000 plus square kilometers. So they're 10 times the size of what our territories are here, meaning that they're traveling just incredible distances regularly.
So, being that I'm not a very intelligent person, kilometers, what does that equate to?
Well, if it makes you feel better, I can't do that equation. Okay. I can't do that conversion very well in my head either. Michigan. So that's right. It's a Michigan thing. Right. I don't know I think it's like 40 or 50. No. I don't even want to say it because people will watch me like, that guy doesn't know what he's doing.
Would you Google it?
We could Google it.
Estimate.
The funny thing is, it's when you're used to doing miles, that's how you think about it. When you switch over and you do the kilometers long enough, it actually becomes a lot easier, which sounds funny because it's all just multiples of 10.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when we do it, I'm like, oh, that seems really natural.
Yeah.
But to most people in the U.S., it is not natural.
Around here,
So you said 1,000 square kilometers?
Up in like Canada would be. Yeah.
Okay. So that would be 386 square miles, roughly.
Well, and I think Kate, didn't she say like 250 square miles in Idaho was kind of average?
And that's why I said Minnesota was.
So with 100 kilometers, that would be
40 maybe, 38, 39.
I mean, I know when I
look at that multiples of 10.
I know when my truck will switch over kilometers and miles per hour. It's kind of fun to do. Don't do that while you're driving. But so that would be the equivalent. That's what I equated to.
Yeah.
I drive 60, but it's actually only 140 kilometers. So
I thought you were talking miles per hour there for a minute.
60 miles per hour equates to
a lot. He likes to feel like he's going fast.
I do. I switch it over sometimes. It actually freaks the wife out when I switch it over.
Only time I ever switched over when I drive into Canada.
Yeah, I don't drive into Canada.
I haven't in a while either.
Yeah.
I mean, I would.
How many trail cams do you guys have?
So right now we have about 350 that we have out in the field.
Wow.
So we've kind of steadily increased it through time because we've basically just learned that the utility, like what we can learn from those cameras is sort of irreplaceable. Like we can, and the more you have, the more observations you get.
Do you go out and get the drives, or are they all cell cameras? Is it a mix?
It's all, none of them are cell cameras.
Okay.
In part because so the one reason that we get a lot of really good data is because they're all video. So we can, you can kind of, watch the animals it's moving. So you can get multiple frames, multiple perspectives. Whereas with photos, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And so we tried to get, so we only do video footage and it's HD footage. So each individual clip that we take is about 64 megabytes, which is really large for sending over a cellular network.
Yeah.
And so we basically have just avoided doing anything cellular. Also, in a lot of our area, we don't have great cell coverage. I mean, it's not bad, but you couldn't send that. Right. So we keep it simple. We use Browning Spec Ops cameras. So their new version is the Elite HP5. For Browning, their nicer cameras are like $190, I think, typically. But they work great. They've got a great detection system. Like they catch things way out. They're very sensitive trigger, which for some people annoys them because it catches a lot of grass and stuff. But for us, we would rather deal with that than miss stuff. Right. But it's a lot of work to keep all those cameras up and running.
Batteries.
And that's only the start, deploying them, keeping batteries, keeping SD cards. And then you have to process all that footage, which takes a long time and store it. And and we're still kind of learning and figuring out our system because we keep adding more cameras, which means we keep having more and more data, and we got to find spots to put it and how to store it and how to access it. So, and that's true of a lot of biologists. I think as time's gone on, there's more and more video capabilities on all sorts of different technology, and people are just getting their sort of hands around how to deal with photos using AI and things like that.
Yep.
And there's not those systems for videos really. And so there's this sort of, a lot of people are like, well, how do we handle all of this data, right? Because I was never trained, during my training in graduate school to like deal with, terabytes of data and how you should do it effectively.
Yep.
So it's kind of learning. It's a very slow learning process.
Right. Hear that, Energizer?
Well,
batteries.
We do use a lot of Energizer batteries.
Lots of batteries.
Yep.
Well, and I was fortunate enough to actually join Tom. Was this a few months back?
Yep.
And go up to the Voyageurs or Voyageurs National Park area and learn a bit more about, how the project works, and tagged along to go out and check these cameras and collect some of that data. And I think Tom said you said that was one of your easier days, and I was limping around for a few days after that. So there's a lot of work that goes into it.
Yeah, during the summer, that'd be tough.
The summers, the winters. Well, this winter was really nice because there's no snow. It was perfect, right? Every day was kind of like a dream. It was like 30 degrees, 40 degrees, so you could just cruise. But yeah, in like a month and a half, it's pretty miserable to do that work. I mean, the spring is nice, the fall's nice, but mid-May, basically to the end of August, is pretty unpleasant. And we, typical days probably putting on 8 to 12, maybe 15 miles of hiking, and particularly because
we did 3 times that.
Jared and I did like 35 miles.
I'm sure he did.
And
you guys barely left the road.
That's right. But yeah, so it's just a lot of work, in part because wolves cover so much ground, and the cameras a lot of those are on trails and things like that. So some of those we can access with an ATV or something like that. There's a fair number that are off trail too, but the wolves, when we're trying to identify kills and things from wolves, I mean, most of those are not on trails. You might use trails to access those spots, but you're just constantly having to go to a lot of places, and wolves like to spend time in a lot of miserable places. And so it's a lot of, bushwhacking through swamps and wetlands and stuff like that. And sometimes that's fun. And then other times, especially when it's hot and buggy, that's really unpleasant. There've been many times I've thought in June and July, like, I don't know if I want to do this next year. And then it kind of passes and you go through the winter and it starts getting warm. Like, this is awesome. And then it kind of you kind of descend into like hell, right? For a little bit. And then you kind of come out in the fall and you're like, man, falls in Minnesota are great, know?
Summers are tough. I know. I can imagine in my head the sweat, the bugs, especially leaf debris on you.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, the bug. If it wasn't for the bugs, I mean, you could probably deal with all of it, but it's just like, that really drives you kind of insane. You just don't get a minute of peace. And especially the past 2 years, for whatever reason, we've just had these sort of epic mosquitoes up there. There's always mosquitoes, but they were kind of, I'd say, next level. And you can't even eat lunch. You don't even want to stop. You just want to get your work done and get out of there. Yeah. And that makes it less fun when all of a sudden it just becomes manual labor for 8 hours or something.
Yeah, the mosquitoes and the deer flies.
Oh yeah,
the sand flies.
And the sand flies. It's just horrible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that's also, again, where you think about like going out west. And like when I was out west, I was like, man, this is awesome. You can just, it's dry, it's sunny, it's warm, and there's no bugs or very few of them. And that often sounds very appealing.
I was in Powell, Wyoming, Wyoming for 3 years. Same thing. Love the winters. You get snow in the mountains, but not, in the valleys.
Sure.
We get snow, but not very much. And summers were nice. Falls were beautiful. So, it's like, I could live here all the time.
It's pretty attractive weather out there.
I chose Minnesota.
Yeah, well, that's why I was in Colorado for 13, 14 years.
There you go.
I don't think I got a bug bite once until I came back here for Christmas and found a mosquito in December.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy here.
I've never left Minnesota. I like to suffer, evidently.
Ignorant.
Right. Yeah. No, that's why I go to the Boundary Waters in like early May, because then you can go anywhere, you can do anything. You go up there in June and you're just asking for trouble.
Yep.
I have never understood that. I mean, I know that folks is probably kids are out of school and that makes sense, but it's kind of like when I hear people like people are in June, I'm like, I am not envious of being out there in June at all. You just got to be in your head net all night, Yeah, it sounds miserable.
Yep. Well, there's that certain time of night, they're horrible between 7 and 9 or almost 7 and 10. And if you can withstand past that 10 o'clock,
it gets a little easier.
Then it gets a little easier. Otherwise, just straight napalm would probably be the best option, most of the time.
I had some friends that got married and did a Boundary Waters trip for their honeymoon. and they did it in June or July, and were showing us all the photos from their honeymoon, and they're in head to toe bug nets. Like, that just doesn't look fun.
No, it doesn't.
No. Yeah, I remember one of the first times I went up there. My dad took me up there. It was in June, because right after school, of course, and it was horrendous. And back then, we didn't have any fancy gear. This is early '90s, So I had like a sweatshirt at best. And I still have nightmares about the noise outside the tent. Just like, what is that? It's freaking mosquitoes. It was the worst trip of my life. I mean, just paddling out was miserable. So yeah, lots of bugs, Tom. I don't know any of that.
Yep.
Yeah. So funding.
Yep.
How does Voyageurs Wolf Project get funding?
Yeah, it's taxpayer dollars, right?
We're actually totally funded by the MDHA.
There you go.
We've just been told we aren't supposed to tell people
deny that. That is not true. Where's the bleep button?
I'm trying to find it. We're never going to live that one. I can't find it.
No. So our funding comes from combination of the Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, which is lottery proceeds, not taxpayer dollars. And then we also get a lot of funding from private donations. So do you want me to start over?
No, you're good.
Sorry. I muted the mic.
So we have about over 6,100 private donors that support our project and have supported us in the past. So that's a large source of our funding. And then we got a lot of funding from nonprofits from a variety of different, some non-outdoor related nonprofits who just support a variety of causes, to some that are focused on supporting environmental causes or things like that. So it's a pretty diverse group of funding. We don't get any funding from the DNR. We don't get any funding from any federal agencies. So we're kind of unique for a lot of wolf research projects in that regard. If you look at pretty much any project that's occurring in the U.S. or Canada, almost all of those are going to have some sort of state, federal, or provincial support.
Yeah.
And we don't have any of that. So that poses some challenges and also has some benefits as well, where we're not connected to an agency. So we can, let's say, share information a lot more readily than, let's say, in a state agency where there's going to be more bureaucracy and steps of how information can be shared. So pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
So none of the universities send you any funding?
So I should say that we do get funding from the University of Minnesota, in the sense that one of our projects, we've got 3 project members who kind of run it. So it's myself, Joe Bump, who's a professor at the University of Minnesota, and then Austin Humks, who's a field biologist. Joe Bump is salaried through the university, so they're supporting his salary, which he doesn't just work on our project. He's got a multitude of projects he's working on. And then we do get support from the university in terms of, like, let's say, administrative support. They're handling, like, donations come through. They're going to be the ones handling that. They're going to be helping us in some instances raise funding. We don't have a budget through the university where they're saying, okay, you get X amount every year that you can rely on. So we definitely get support and help from them, but it's not, we have to raise basically all of our money every year to keep our project going.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's been part of the challenge, I would say, too, for us long-term, is just kind of like, how do you do that? So I don't have a guaranteed salary if we don't get a grant or something, like,
right.
I'm just out of luck, And so that does keep a little bit of pressure to kind of constantly, and it's probably not dissimilar from a nonprofit model, honestly, and it's sort of like a hybrid of the two, right? Where, like, yes, we get some administrative support from the larger university, but we still have to raise most of our funding every year. And so we're kind of doing a lot of donor, interacting with donors, applying for grants, doing all of that kind of stuff to kind of keep the lights on.
Awesome. So are you technically a nonprofit then?
No, we're technically under the university. So we aren't. Okay. So the Voyageurs Wolf Project isn't like its own nonprofit. We're a project under the university umbrella. Okay. And that's sort of how we, in the same way, like professors at universities create a lab, right? That they kind of have their graduate students and stuff in. That's basically what our project is like at the university.
The Minnesota Deer Hunters Association has been building our hunting and conservation legacy over the past 40 plus years through habitat, education, advocacy, and legislation in Minnesota for Minnesota.
So what is your degree actually?
So my master's is in biology and my PhD is in conservation biology, or conservation sciences technically. Okay. So these are kind of, both of them are sort of large fields of work that encompass all sorts of stuff. Right. Conservation sciences can be wildlife, fisheries, all sorts of different things. Obviously, my focus was wildlife in particular and ecology, but took other, more general courses as well.
Okay. Well, so let me ask you then, if a college kid right now is in a biology program, doing great, smart kid, what would you say they should do with that biology degree?
Well, that's a broad question.
I know. You've been there.
So I'd say it really depends. I think probably the best thing you can do is determine what exactly you want to study. So a lot of people come out with general, like that's what I came out of my undergrad with, was a biology degree. And I wasn't sure if I was interested in forestry, fisheries, wildlife. I mean, because all of that seemed interesting at the time. And it wasn't clear to me, what did someone who's in forestry do? What did someone in wildlife do, on a day-to-day basis? And even within the wildlife field, there's all sorts of you could say, different careers. You could do human dimensions, deal with people. Okay. You could do just research. You could deal with, let's say, hunting and trapping management, all of these different things, right? So I think the best thing you can do is, if you're not sure, is to go follow people who are doing different things and see, like, does that look appealing? Would I want to do that day in and day out? Because a lot of times you see, especially with wildlife biologists, you see something on National Geographic or something that shows what a wildlife biologist does. And it really doesn't, it shows the highlights of their job, right, but it doesn't really show what 99% of that job is. Right. And so I think that's the best thing, that particularly folks that are coming out of undergrad who aren't entirely sure what to do, is to go find people that might have a job that you think sounds interesting, and or even just go interview and be like, what does your actual day-to-day job look like? And also, what can be helpful is to do seasonal positions where you work for a couple months during a summer, right, and kind of get a flavor of what that looks like. And what does your boss do during that time, and kind of feel out if you like that or not. And there's been a lot of people who I've known and who've worked on our project who are kind of in that position. They come out of undergrad, they're trying to get some experience. They come work on our project for summer, and some of them go like, this is exactly what I want to do. This is awesome. And some people are like, I like that, but that's not my cup of tea. I just don't want to do that. And they go do something else. Those yeah. Or people, we've had some folks that have come and they've, worked on our project, and they then go to be a conservation officer because they're actually more interested in that more hands-on thing. The research side of things deals with a lot of data and stuff, and that's not what they're interested in, Or some people want to deal more with just the management side of things. They're not so interested in, let's say, the research. They want to deal with, making regulations, dealing with people and things like that. So that's the best advice I'd have for folks, is kind of go see what is out there and what really, gets you excited to get and work.
Yeah, I only ask because my daughter's doing that right now.
I figured as much. Yeah. and that's, there's a lot of people that are in that right. position because biology is, at least from my perspective, like I went to a small liberal arts college. There was no wildlife program, right? I didn't know anyone else who did wildlife stuff. And it was kind of daunting of like, well, now where do I go? Right. And fortunately was able to kind of get some seasonal experience at a few spots. And that kind of let me know what I wanted to do and what I didn't. So like, for example, between my sophomore and junior year in college, I volunteered at a place called Wolf Park, which is a captive wolf facility. Because at the time I'd watched, so originally I was going to be a computer science major, which is a horrible, horrible decision. I just didn't know what I was going to do. So I just, and I only did that for a semester, and I quickly realized like I don't like this at all. And so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. So then I watched some outdoor documentaries, and there was one in particular of, I forgot what it was, some corny documentary of someone who's going in with wolves. And I thought, oh, that looks pretty cool. I'd like to do, who wouldn't want to get paid to do that? And so then I went and I got a position working at a captive wolf facility where we got to actually interact with captive wolves. But I quickly realized that like I did not enjoy that experience. Like it was enjoyable in the sense of I enjoyed the people I was with, but like I didn't want to do that day in, day out. Because most of what I did was just mowing lawns, maintaining fences, and for like maybe an hour a week, you kind of interact with the animals. But really, that just did not excite me at all. And I also I wanted to do stuff studying wild animals, not captive. So it was super helpful for me for realizing what I wanted to do, because up to that point, I had a very different vision of where I was going to go. And that kind of helped steer me in the right direction. So I think things like that can be helpful for folks.
Right, for sure.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So you're saying you're in the right direction now, then?
I don't know.
No, I think you're doing great up there.
Yeah. I think it's certainly, I think I'm happy where I ended up. I like the research side of things really gets me excited because it sort of satisfies two things that I'm interested in. The one is just being outside. Like I have an excuse where I can be outside a fair bit and doing work. But then I also really enjoy the, I would say, sort of intellectual aspect of it, where you're collecting data, you're trying to make sense of patterns, and you're kind of putting this puzzle together, knowing you don't have all the pieces. And so you're trying to figure out, how can I understand something a bit better by just getting little tidbits of information. And I find that really interesting to do. Like, that's really enjoyable. Some folks don't like that aspect. I think like looking at data is really cool. Like, it's really cool to come up with a question in your mind, say, we want to go look at this thing, collect data, and then be able to like look at it and say, okay, we understand a little better how the natural world works because we collected data in this way. And so that gets me excited. That doesn't always get a lot of other people excited because there's some parts that are really, I'd say, boring or tedious.
Right.
So,
but they sure love the maps and stuff you put out. That's where they get excited.
Absolutely.
That's where they get excited.
And that's what we try to do, is kind of distill down all of that more tedious work into something that kind of is the end result of what all that work results in.
Right.
So everybody may know this, but I don't. How many acres does, I guess the Voyageurs park cover, and/or because you guys cover pretty much the whole thing, obviously, or study the whole thing. Do you know how many acres the park covers?
So I'm going to give you something in square kilometers again, which isn't going to be very helpful.
We'll get the calculator ready.
So our study area includes Voyageurs National Park and then a big chunk of land. Actually, more of our study area is outside of the park than in it. And part of that's because if you look at the park, there's a lot of the park that's just water. And so a lot of packs are kind of on the edge of the park, or then we also study a lot that are outside. In total, our study area is about 2,000 square kilometers, which I'm going to guess is 800 square miles or something like that.
Well, it'd be double whatever we said before, right? So 772.
There we go. So that's about the size of our study area. So if you're familiar with that area at all, we basically go to the park. We go all the way down to basically Ash Lake. And then over to Ray, Minnesota. Okay. And then we kind of go up by Ericsburg and kind of follow the Rat Root Lake. And that's kind of the edge of our study area. And then it goes all the way up to kind of the eastern edge of International Falls. Okay. So it's a pretty sizable area when to travel from one end to the other is probably 2 hours, of driving, in part because you have got to go around lakes and all that kind of jazz. So it's a big area.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, obviously this is probably debatable, but how many wolves do you study in the area?
So I'd say two things. I don't think it's debatable, first of all, in part because I think we know pretty well how many there are because we have cameras all the way in that area. So I should note, this year we're collecting our data still. So our sort of winter survey period ended yesterday. And so we're going to collect all of our trail camera data and go through. We think there's probably 20 to 21 packs in that area right now. Wow. Last year, I believe there's 20 that we thought were in our study area. And then we have cameras in all those territories so we can know who's in them and everything like that. What we don't do is actually estimate the number of wolves in our area because take it back. We do estimate the number of wolves, but we don't quantify it in that way. We don't say, there's 100 wolves. And the reason why is because there's a lot of territories that kind of like our boundary of our study area is very subjective, right? It doesn't mean anything to wolves. What we do is measure density. And that's actually the best metric you could estimate probably most wildlife populations in, is the number of animals per square. Ours is square kilometers, but you could do square miles or whatever. And so in our area, we have average about 64 to 65 wolves per 1,000 square kilometers, which is a really high density wolf population, relatively speaking. Yeah. It's still, like, for most animal populations, pretty low. Like deer, for instance, our estimates are on average, it's been about 4 deer per square kilometer. That's per square kilometer. This is per wolves 1,000. Are measured in per 1,000 square kilometers because their densities occur so low that if you did it on a per square kilometer basis, you'd be in decimals, right? Because there's so few relative to the area. Right. But nonetheless, so we have a high density wolf population, and it's remained that way for, we think, about 30 years or so. If we go back to the early work that was done in Voyageurs in the 1980s and then the 1990s, it looks like that population has sustained pretty much similar levels throughout that period. Obviously, they fluctuate, so that doesn't mean they stay the same year after year. It just means that the trajectory there isn't a trend where it's like going up or down. It's just kind of level, and it bounces around sort of an average.
Gotcha. At Wolf.report, citizen science means that you provide the data and we provide the platform. Our website is designed for the citizens, hunters, trappers, and anybody else in Minnesota to easily report wolf encounters and share location data.
Yeah. So, Tom, we've talked a bit about the history of Voyageurs Wolf Project and yourself, but we haven't really touched on what is the mission of Voyageurs Wolf Project, because we hear a lot about you're either a pro-wolf organization and you're out there to go against everything the hunters of the state want to see, and we also hear the other side of the issue that you're inflating numbers. And
Sure, absolutely, yes, we certainly get I'd say heat from both sides of the wolf spectrum. And we'd say we try to be right in the middle in the sense that we really don't take a lot of stance on any sort of management related initiatives or anything like that. We're really focused on trying to study wolves, learn as much as we can about them. And we don't really care so much what that means for management policy, in the sense that we're not going to let that dictate how we're going to look and investigate things. Our long-term goal of the project is really to gain a really comprehensive understanding of wolves, largely during the summertime. And by summer, I mean the wolves' biological summer, which goes from April basically to the end of October, when the pups are kind of fully mature, traveling around with adults. So that's one of our biggest goals, is to really understand wolf ecology during that time, because that's when wolves have been very difficult to study in Minnesota. And so there's a lot of things we don't know. And not just in Minnesota, but a lot of places with forested ecosystems where prior to the advent of technology like GPS collars and trail cameras, you couldn't really study them in any meaningful way. So that's what our big goal is. Of course, to study wolves during the summer, we also have to kind of know what they're doing year round. So we do a lot of work in the winter as well to estimate population size in our area, pack size, things like that. So our goal is to learn as much as we can about wolves and to keep our project going long term, because every year that we get more data, the better our conclusions are, because we have higher sample sizes and we get insight that, maybe after 4 years, we didn't understand a pattern. But now that we have 8, 9, 10 years, now all of a sudden we see a pattern a lot more clearly and can understand what's going on. And then obviously a big part of our work is also to share what we're doing with the public through outreach and education. And by education, we just mean sharing what we're doing, what we'll know, and sharing that with the public, and trying to disseminate that information in a way that's accessible to people, and then also that they're interested in, because science doesn't occur in a vacuum. And, you can do all the science in the world, but if it doesn't, people can't understand it and they can't comprehend it and understand what it means, it doesn't have as much utility. So we're really focused on trying to make it accessible, hopefully sometimes entertaining for folks, try to also show that we're people too, sort of throw in some humor and things like that in our social media. And then also just to share, because of the work we do, we get access to a lot of information that the general public just doesn't have. Most people can't go out in the woods and just slap a collar on a wolf and say, let's just see where it goes. We obviously get that kind of information, and we can share, this is, where the territories are. This is how they travel. And then obviously trail cameras, we can share our sort of highlights of our trail camera footage. And with the number of cameras out, we often get a lot of neat stuff. And we can share that with people for free. And so we think that's pretty cool to be able to take our work and share it with literally hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people. And then all they have to do is log on to, social media, and they can see that information.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So capturing and collaring the wolf. Mm-hmm. So is it a collar itself, or is there any, internal GPS
like an
just
implant?
Like a probe.
Yeah. Right.
The federal government has given us very small probes that we put in them.
I knew it.
Is that what's in my probe?
That's right. I put one in Jared when he came out, so I could track his movements.
I knew it.
So the way we collar wolves is we catch them using rubber padded foothold traps, which are very similar to a foothold trap you would see trappers using, except there's modifications that sort of ensure that those animals can be released safely and with minimal injury or anything like that. And because what we really want is to catch a wolf, and we want to release it and it to go back to being a normal wolf as fast as it can, because then we can get data the most efficiently. And that's how wolves pretty much in the state of Minnesota are caught, is using foothold traps, and probably most places in North America, just because wolves are very difficult to catch. And, you can catch them from a helicopter or something, but that's very expensive and very tough to do in a forested place like Minnesota, where you can't do that. Out west, that's a little bit easier because it's more open. So that's how we catch the wolves. And then once we catch a wolf, we sedate it, and we put the collar on, and the wolf is sedated for probably about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes. And then it starts kind of waking up. We release it. It's going to be a little groggy. It'd be like someone coming out of surgery or being sedated for getting their wisdom teeth taken out or something. They're going to take a little bit to kind of get their feet back under them, but it's not going to take too long, and then they'll be back at it, and we'll start tracking them and studying oftentimes their predation behavior, studying their movements, and trying to really learn as much as we can about where they're going.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool.
For sure.
How many wolves do you guys have collared?
So right now, we're at like the low part of our, like if you think about it as an annual cycle, typically we're collaring wolves in the spring and early summer, so that we can then study them throughout the summer. And then as the year goes on, basically the number of functional collars that are out on wolves kind of goes down because some of the wolves are going to die, some are going to leave our area, and then sometimes you do have collar failures that you don't anticipate. So right now, I think we have 9 or 10 on the air. Whereas we'll start trying to get collars out here now once spring, once we get into May and June. And so our hope will be that we get another probably 12, 15 collars out on collared wolves. So we'll have a lot for the summer, but wolves just generally don't live super long lives. And so there's many times where you think, man, we've really got it set up. We got wolves in all these packs, and then stuff happens and all of a sudden it's like, wow, we really don't have that many collars out anymore. So it's kind of like you're always behind. And that's just because the average life expectancy of a wolf is probably 3 to 5 years. And most wolves that are young aren't going to get to be old because they're going to die before they become a breeding animal and settle down in a pack. And so that's not uncommon for us to have wolves just kind of die for all sorts of different reasons. So that's one of our biggest challenges, getting collars out every year.
So you rely more on the cameras than the collars necessarily for numbers and how many you see in a way.
In some sense, it really actually depends, I'd say, on both of them. So the cameras are really helpful for determining the number of wolves in each pack. Okay. And the way that we generally know where packs are from the collar data. And so the collar data gives us the spatial arrangement of where wolves are at and lets us know, okay, if we put our cameras in these areas, we're going to be studying this pack, and then next to them is this pack. And so it kind of lets us know where the wolves are at. You could, in theory, put cameras out and probably get rough estimates of like, okay, we always get these wolves in this area and these other ones in this area, but they're not very precise. So we really need the GPS collar data to estimate our wolf populations, because they show us where the territory boundaries are. And also very important when estimating wolf populations is to understand how much packs overlap with one another. Because when you think about it, while wolves generally try to avoid each other, their territories do overlap. And so when you're trying to estimate density of them, you have to account for that overlap. And the GPS collars allow us to estimate and quantify, okay, how much does the average territory overlap with other wolves? And then we can factor that into our density estimate so we get a more accurate estimate. So it's really both, I would say.
Right. Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. I would have no idea.
Right. So how much do one of those collars cost?
They're pretty expensive.
Yeah, I was looking at the website today. I noticed they didn't list the price.
They're about probably $2,500.
Wow.
Yeah, they're pretty expensive. It's obviously a very niche market, and one of the challenges too with wolves is wolves are really tough on collars because they live if you think about a deer, right? A typical deer's not going to be doing a lot of crazy adventurous stuff. They're going to be meandering, eating vegetation. But a wolf is going to be running all over the place. They're going to be chasing prey. They're going to be banging up that collar. And the wire in a collar, there's wiring that runs in it, right? And so you can imagine any wire that's just flexing all the time, right? And getting beat up sooner or later, even if it's protected well, starts to get cracks, and that can cause collar failures and things like that. So wolves are kind of notorious when you talk about GPS collars, especially with collar companies, of being like, yeah, well, if you're going to put this on a wolf, change your expectations a little bit, and so typically if we can get 2 or 3 years out of a collar, that's pretty good right now. And obviously you have battery limitations too. You've got wolves, and this is true of all wildlife. There's generally a rule that you don't put a collar on animals that weigh more than 3 to 4% of their body weight. And that's just to make sure that isn't an undue burden on them. So with wolves, that means a collar can only be, especially in Minnesota where we have smaller wolves, those collars can't weigh all that much, which means the batteries have to be smaller, and so they don't last as long. Whereas, you can imagine if you're studying a bison, right?
Yeah,
they can carry a massive, battery, and that makes the collar last longer. You don't have that possibility.
You're using T-cell batteries then, or?
They use, so the batteries are, at least the one company we work with measures them in D batteries. There's 1D, 2D, 3D. Wolves can only really wear 1 or 2Ds. Some bigger ones, maybe a 3D. But then you also start running into sort of bulkiness too. And, with wolves being smaller, you don't want to put a collar that, even if it's light, is sort of like,
Right.
an impediment for them to be able to do their wolf stuff.
On Wolf Report, we've gotten several pictures of wolves with collars on, not in your area. So who's collaring those wolves?
Sure. Yeah. So there's lots of folks actually around the state that collar wolves. So a lot of the tribes in the area do, like Grand Portage, 1854, Red Lake, Fond du Lac. And then the Minnesota DNR also is collaring wolves in certain areas. I'm not sure exactly where the DNR collars wolves from year to year. The best thing you can do is anyone can go onto their wolf reports, annual wolf reports that the DNR releases, and they actually show in there a figure of where the collared packs are, but it doesn't show whose they are. So we oftentimes don't know either of like, we can just look at it and go, oh, okay. Like there's some wolves there that are collared.
Somebody's tracking them somewhere.
But we often get a lot of folks who also email us and they see a collared wolf somewhere. Like, is this yours? And no, that's not ours. Whose is it? I don't know. If they're close to, let's say,
could you color code them?
Well, so for us, that's actually what we do. We put duct tape on the collars that have different colors, and our wolves have ear tags. Not all agencies use large ear tags necessarily, but we do because the ear tags are color coded by pack actually. So, and this is for our area because then when we see a wolf on a camera, we say, okay, that one's got yellow ear tags. We know there's only a handful of wolves that have yellow ear tags, and what we do is on the end of our ear tags, we get a marker that's a special marker for the tags, and actually we draw a symbol on the end of that ear tag. So we can say, okay, there's only one wolf that has a yellow ear tag with a triangle on the end. And so we can narrow down which individual that we're seeing at any given time. And that's also true if one goes anywhere in the state, we can say, okay, that's that. So like for last year, we actually had a wolf that went from our area. We studied it for a summer. It went north of Spooner, Wisconsin, settled down in a pack there. And it kind of hung out. And we actually, the collars have a drop-off mechanism in them, which allows the collar to fall off.
I was going to ask that.
And so, and you can either set it, we set all of them sort of before we deploy them, but then you can also drop them at any time based on the satellite signal. So that wolf, we are like, okay, that wolf has settled down. It's in Wisconsin. We want to get that collar back so we can put it on another wolf. So we actually blew the collar. Well, it turns out that wolf was caught by a coyote trapper that fall, and then the Wisconsin DNR collared it, and they were able to determine who it was because it had the ear tag on with the symbol, and they could then say, oh, that's this project because this is their markings. So there are value to kind of marking your animals that way.
Yeah, for sure. Just how far they travel.
Well, it seems like you all have a pretty robust methodology with the collaring, the color coding, and the trail cams and everything. And with our current official estimates in the state of a wolf population between 2,900 wolves, do you think if we employed your methodology to a broader part of the state, whether that be the current established wolf range or statewide, do you think we'd see a significant difference in that total population estimate?
Sure. Well, that's a good question. So there's a couple things that are important to note. So the first is that the Minnesota DNR effectively deploys a method that's pretty similar to ours, obviously at a much larger scale. It's a lot easier to study the number of wolves within a 2,000 square kilometer area where we can have cameras in all the different pack territories than in a place like Minnesota where it's massive, right? And you've got a lot of area. So I'd say there's obviously with any estimate, you're going to have things that could be aspects where you're underestimating populations and stuff where you could be overestimating. And it's always hard to kind of verify those things. I'd say we can look at some real basic metrics. Like if you look at wolf populations and you can just say, okay, what's wolf range in Minnesota, right? Which the DNR quantifies. And I know with Wolf Report, that's been another way that it's, been quantified and matches up fairly well with the DNR's estimate. Then you can just take that area and say, okay, well, let's just assume the average territory is, let's say 150 square kilometers, which is what it's been in the state for a while. Well, you can just divide the wolf range by that and say, okay, that's how many packs there are. And what about if each pack has 4.5 wolves on average, right? So you can kind of do some real basic estimates using basic information on wolf biology and say, okay, this is in the ballpark. And by and large, if you do that, you'll see that the state's estimates are pretty much in the ballpark of what you'd expect. That doesn't mean they're perfect. I mean, no estimate's ever going to be perfect. If you look at the state's estimates, they have confidence intervals because they're saying it could be between these estimates, right? So I'd say there are certain ways that, obviously you can always refine your estimates, try to do things better. I think it's tough. Like if you were to do it on a state level, you'd probably need substantially more funding to probably make that possible because you'd have to cover a much larger area. My guess is, it could be off by a couple hundred wolves, but that would fall within their confidence intervals that they have. Now, I know some people will be incredulous and they will find that hard to believe because I've heard people say there's 8,000, 10,000, whatever. Right. But when you look at that, that just defies any study on wolf biology. In particular, like I said, we can look at the spatial organization. We can say wolves, generally speaking, do not share their territory with another pack, or at least not most of it. They might share the peripheries a little bit. So if we just take that premise, again, you can kind of do some basic estimates knowing what is the typical territory size, how many wolves are in a typical territory, and get an estimate. And that winds you up pretty close to where the states is. There are some aspects of, let's say, how territories are estimated, and biologists have all these different quantitative ways to estimate where the edge of a territory is and things like that. That might refine things a little bit, and it might change the estimate by a couple percent, but that's small when we're talking about the state. Like I don't think you'd see a huge difference. And even if you change the methodology a little bit, let's say, you're probably still going to see the same pattern or trajectory in the population because any change you make is just going to sort of, every estimate is going to be done still the same way. You might just revise where that level is. So it's, let's say it's remained similar at 2,900, right? Or around that. Well, if you change the method, okay, maybe now it's at 2,800 or 3,000, but it's just going to continue at that same thing because now you just have the same method being done with the new data, but it's still all collected the same way year after year. Yeah. So that's, so I don't think it's, I don't see any reason why it's way off, right? Now, the only thing is obviously if we saw a huge expansion in wolf range, right, that could change. Obviously, as wolves are expanding and they start getting new territory, then yeah, you're going to have more wolves in the state than you did. But it doesn't seem like that's the case as much anymore, at least based on what the DNR has shown. Obviously, wolf report. And then obviously things like you can look at like livestock issues, right? You would expect that if wolf range was expanding into, let's say, a lot of places where there's now a lot of people, agriculture, you would start seeing a lot more issues with wolves, right? And you would know about it because people would be calling the government. They'd be saying, get these wolves out of here, et cetera. And certainly that happens on the periphery, but it's not like you're in, southwestern Minnesota seeing wolves getting taken out all the time. Yep. So I'd say it's probably pretty balanced or pretty close. But you can always refine estimates and you can always try to get your confidence intervals smaller. And that's obviously on our project. What we've tried to do is say, we want to buy a boatload of cameras and we want to collar a lot of wolves. So we have a really high degree of certainty in our estimates. Yep. But like I said, that's a lot easier to do when you're only studying 20 packs as opposed to what they estimate. There's like 500 in Minnesota or something.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, no, I think that's a really good summary. And yeah, we hear it all the time too, that there's 10,000. I've heard 30,000.
Oh yeah, me too.
Well, it's, because they triple in, size every couple of years and everything.
I thought it was every month.
And, packs are, the DNR says there's 4. Well, I've seen 20 in a pack. And it's like, seriously, every animal dies at some point. They don't just, especially wild animals, they don't have a 15, 20 year, expectancy.
Nope.
Like you said, you're only talking 2 to 5.
Yeah, they live short lives and they reproduce fairly quickly, but it's not a long lifespan. So there's a lot of turnover. And I think the other thing too is, the challenge I think is a lot of people have a lot of tools now to monitor and see what's going on outside that they didn't have historically, right? Yep. And that can be, I think, can be misleading at times, right? Because you can see wolves, let's say on a trail camera, and you can automatically assume that, okay, it's easy to say, okay, well, I have all these wolves on my camera. They got to all be different wolves, right? They're always here. And then your buddy sees them and someone else sees them. And so there's this impression that they're just like omnipresent all over, tons of packs. I had someone tell me they have 6 packs occupying their area, right? And it's like, that's really interesting because that's new to me and anything I'm aware of. But I think that's the challenge, right? Is it's easy to get that perception. And it's probably what people are seeing is probably what's happened for a long, long time. They just didn't have the ability to see it. And now that they do, it's hard to not let your own biases or your own perceptions kind of change the way you view data. And everyone likes to think I'm viewing it objectively, but the reality is that's very hard to do, right? Especially when you only have like, let's say 2 or 3 cameras and limited data. We're fortunate in the position where we have lots of cameras and we also have the collar data, so we can put things in context. So generally when I have people telling me stuff with their cameras, it's like, okay, you just have to think about that in kind of context. And we try to share that obviously in our area when we can to help folks.
Well, and the thing is I guarantee those same people will, they've got their trail cameras and they have their deer. They know the deer that come on their property and know that this is a different doe, this is a different buck. But when it comes to wolves or any, even coyotes or any other predator, like every one of those are different. It's the same wolf or the same coyote that visits the trail cam every 3 or 4 days. They think it's different because of their bias.
Well, how many pictures do we see where they post it and they say, is this a wolf or a coyote? Right. Yeah. And now you're going to tell me you can tell one wolf apart from another wolf.
Yeah.
And then the wolf you got on your trail camera from the wolf your buddy got on his a mile down the road.
Exactly.
And I think that's too with our, that's one of the values that we have with doing video footage, right? Is we can review it and we can sit there and we can study it and say, okay, that one has this marking, and you can watch it the whole time. Whereas you just get a photo that's blurry. It's just one wolf and you have no idea who it is. But I can say from putting out all these cameras, like wolves cover a ton of ground. Like we'll have a wolf go by 10 cameras, depending where it's at. Like it can run down a logging road that's 8 miles long. And if we have 7 cameras, we're going to get that wolf on every single camera that runs on that road. And if you don't have that perspective to know, oh yeah, that's just the same animal. It's not 7 wolves, that's 1. But that's hard for folks and understandably hard because they don't have that ability. They don't know where the territories are. And in a lot of Minnesota, there's not collared wolves. So you don't know what you're seeing. And if you're of the inclination that there's too many of them, you're going to see that there's too many, right? And so trail cameras are kind of a pro and con sort of thing. But we try to I think it's helpful for folks to understand the limitations of trail cameras.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, and I hope they realize that you may have gotten 10 pictures of a wolf, but it might be the same wolf.
Yeah, you don't have 6 packs on your property.
No, well, it's the same with I've got 6 deer in my yard almost every single night, and it's the same deer that have been there for at least 3 or 4 years. And I know this doe, she has twins every 2 years. Another doe, she only has singles. One doe has a broken leg at her. I don't know, I call her elbow. I'm not a deer biologist, but at her elbow, she's the oldest doe that we have, but I always know it's her because of how she walks.
Sure.
Now in a trail cam photo, you can't tell the difference unless she steps just right. But walking through the yard, I can see her and go, okay, well, that's Betsy, because of how she walks. And I guarantee 2 or 3 of the does that are still there are her offspring.
Right.
And for whatever reason, they never bring in a buck. I don't know. I have 1 buck on my camera over the last 2 years. But obviously there's bucks around because we have, we always
young
have
ones.
Yeah. Yep. So it's just, but yeah, people know they're deer, but some people just they don't want to know.
They don't want to admit
they're
that
wolves.
It's the same wolf.
Exactly.
And I think that's and additionally too, where a lot of people put their trail cameras, people think that they've got an unbiased, let's say, sample of what's going on, right? But really most people don't put trail cameras in random spots, right? They put them on cleared areas where they're going to hunt. So hunting lanes, they're going to put it on trails by their house, places that are going to be open and very easy for wolves to travel by. And I can guarantee you that if people just started putting cameras randomly in the woods, they would get a very different set of photos and videos than they would if they're putting on trails, because wolves love using trails and cleared areas just like people do. And so when people send me stuff or their hunting lane, right? A wolf doesn't care. It's a hunting lane. It's a cleared path and it's easy to travel down. And so folks, in some sense, are putting cameras at the spots where they're most likely to get images of wolves. And then they say, oh, there's tons of wolves. It's like, well, you're putting it on the travel corridors. Go put it somewhere where there's not. And you're going to get a very different sample, which is why in a lot of trail camera studies where people are trying to, let's say, really estimate the abundance of different animals, they display the cameras randomly. They don't put them on, let's just pick the easiest spots we can get to. They put them in random spots because they know if they do pick where they want to, it's not going to be representative. And I've almost thought about doing this on our project just to illustrate this. Ultimately, I just end up not wanting to do that. But because, it wouldn't be very hard to say, okay, let's put a camera on a trail. And let's put one 500 feet in the woods and see what we get. And I guarantee you those are going to be dramatically different.
Yep, exactly.
Well, for sure. But
point.
I mean, at some point, though, you'd have to find a natural wildlife trail, right? I mean,
You'd probably find natural, but you'd get a more balanced of you'd get a better representation of, let's say, the number of deer, the number of wolves there. Because, we hear all the time, I see more wolves than deer.
Right.
I've heard that I don't know, hundreds of times. Right.
Yeah.
And people say, how can that be? Well, it's like biologically, you can't be more predators than prey. Like it just doesn't. No ecosystem works that way. So it's like, how do you see those patterns? Well, you're seeing a lot of the same wolves, and also you're putting them on the spots where you're prone to get a lot more wolves. And there's the possibility that deer don't hang out around roads and trails because that's where their predators are at.
Right.
And that's where they're traveling. So why are they going to spend time in those areas? They're going to go to the spots where they're less likely to encounter their prey. So that's kind of where I'm saying, like, you might get a more balanced assessment if you're looking at those things.
Can we say that a little bit louder for the folks in the back?
What's that?
They're seeing all sorts of wolves, but no deer. There's no deer. Obviously, there's deer in the area because there's wolves.
100%. Yes. Yep. And I think that's, I've had several people this winter told me, and they were dead serious, that there would not be any deer alive by this spring. They were adamant. They weren't joking. And it's just, okay. And guess what? We still have deer, and we have every year. And one thing I did that was really interesting is I went back through the historical, you can go on the Minnesota Historical Society, and you can look at all the old newspapers in the state. It's very interesting. So you can Google wolves, deer, etc. And what's really interesting is that since the late 1800s, early 1900s, no matter what the deer population's doing, people are always complaining that there's not deer. Right. That the wolves are decimated. It doesn't matter even when deer hunting's good or bad. And so there's this sort of perception that I don't know if any amount of evidence will ever change that. But obviously for like in our area, for wolves trimming at high densities, they have to have sufficient prey to do that. Right. They couldn't. Yeah. And people say, oh, there's beavers. Yes, there's certainly beavers during the summer. But come wintertime, there's no beavers around. So there has to be enough deer year in, year out to support that. Or you'd see the population of wolves just crash.
Well, I thought your Voyageurs Wolf Project was funding snorkels for the wolves to be able to get into those beaver lodges.
We're putting food out there for the wolves in the summertime and the wintertime just to keep them at those high densities.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Jared, did you hear that on Facebook?
I did. I won't say the page. We all know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, we do, but it's the truth, I'm sure of it.
Right.
What actually happened is the MDHA said, we're going to get you a ton of beavers, put them out in the winter because we want to really decimate the deer hunting. And we said, okay, as long as that's what you want to do. So that's what we did. So
no, it's all the eclipse.
Yeah.
Blame it on that.
I would believe it.
Exactly.
The eclipse was something.
We didn't even see it.
No.
It
got a little dark.
I had to take my sunglasses off for like 20 minutes. That's about as extreme as it got.
Yep. So, question for you. Do you think, and you can answer this or not.
Sure.
Do you think the wolf should be on the endangered species list?
The $1 million question.
Right. And I had to ask
let's say in Minnesota.
Right.
In Minnesota.
Sure.
Right, yep,
no, that's fine.
That.
And I'm going to give you an answer that'll probably be deeply unsatisfying, which is that
I'm already unsatisfied.
And that I really
wanted a
don't.
1 year answer or 1 word answer.
The fact of the matter is, whether or not wolves should be on the endangered species list really comes down to an understanding what the intent of the Endangered Species Act was and interpreting what that law means and how we should manage animals and recovery and things like that. And that's not something that I have no understanding of legal acts like that, and so we study wolves. We certainly in our area have a high density wolf population that's remained stable. Obviously, there's high densities of wolves across a lot of northern Minnesota. Whether or not that means wolves should or should not be on the Endangered Species Act is for other people to debate and discuss and argue about, and not really something we spend really any time thinking about or even worrying about, to be honest.
You're there to provide the data to inform policy decisions, not to make those decisions.
Correct.
Right?
We share all of our data, and we're required to via our permits with the Minnesota DNR. We share our reports with the Fish and Wildlife Service because right now we have to have a permit from them to do our work because wolves are a threatened species, and that's the extent of the work we do. And then they make their decisions. And obviously, oftentimes it gets then also through the sort of legal process. A lot of these are things are taken to court and discussed that way. And, that has little to do with any of our work other than we just provide the data.
Perfect.
You weren't down at the Capitol testifying today.
Right.
Contrary to what
you made good time back up here.
Contrary to what people think, we don't speak to any politicians. We don't advocate for any management related stuff. If some politician reached out and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about what you're learning about wolves," sure, I'll sit down and we'll share what we want. No one's done that, and I'm guessing no one will.
You mean nobody's reached out to you from that end of it?
Not from the legal or not from the political aspect.
That's crazy.
And I don't know. Yeah, we've just not, I don't know. And it's not something we think about either of which political person should we get in contact with? It's just not part of our work.
And I don't think that's surprising at all. It goes back to what we were just saying. They're there to provide the data for other organizations to use to make their argument. We've used Voyageurs Wolf Project data to testify, there are this many wolves in this area. It's time to get a wolf hunt back, have responsible wildlife management for all species, for the benefit of all species, right? Yeah. And then groups on the other side of the issue have used your data.
And that's, right? And that from my perspective, it's okay. In my opinion, our and this is really where it comes down to what's the role of science versus values. And unfortunately, science, both sides oftentimes in these debates say the science supports their perspective and really doesn't support any of their perspectives, right? It tells us how the natural world's working, what our actions may or may not, what impact those may or may not have. It doesn't tell us whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? And I think that's the unfortunate thing is we hear people arguing about what their science says. And really what people should be discussing is what are their values? What do they care about? What matters to them? Because that's really what matters. And our project has nothing to say or add about what values are. My perspective doesn't matter of what I value any more than what any of you value or what any wolf advocate values. That's a larger discussion. And I think, unfortunately what happens is there's an understanding that, there must be some secret, if let's say some data comes out that doesn't support that wolves are decimating deer populations, well, then you're automatically making a value statement, right? Yep. And from our perspective, that's not making a statement at all. We're just trying to describe how the world works. To me, that doesn't hinge on whether or not, or I should say, wolf management doesn't hinge on that question, For a lot of folks, so that sometimes kind of is the anchoring point of, if wolves aren't, let's say, decimating deer, then our argument for managing wolves falls apart, right? And I think that's an example of conflating values and science.
And I'm glad you brought that up because it really is a values perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And I hear all the time that it's the hunters in northern Minnesota that want to see wolf management. And it's the people down in the cities that are preventing that from being able to happen, right? And that comes down to values, right? The data doesn't change. It's 27 to 2,900 wolves, whether you're pro-wolf or you're pro-wolf management. Mm-hmm. So it's how you interpret the values of that. And unfortunately, us as hunters or people who want to see active wolf management in the state, we have a responsibility of making a compelling argument to those that hold the other side or the other side of that value coin, let's say. And even more so the people that are in the middle. Mm-hmm. And we see all too much hunters or pro-wolf management advocates that are doing the opposite. We see it anywhere from rhetoric on Facebook or any social media post, about the 3 S's and, break the law because these rabid wolves are after your children. Right. That's not the case. And then, I feel we usually refrain from calling out names or organizations, but
typically,
but I feel the need to call out Cody Roberts out of Wyoming. This is and I don't know, the media called him a hunter. I would probably get the bleep button. I'd call him a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You got it right that time. But no, I mean, this guy wants wolf management, and has it, right? In the state of Wyoming.
Yeah.
But he feels the need to take an injured wolf that he ran over with his snowmobile, duct tape its mouth shut, parade it around town to different bars, put a shock collar around its neck, shock it for hours, and then take it out back and shoot it. Now, if you are a pro-wolf person or even someone in the middle and you see that story, which side of the aisle are you going to?
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Those of us that want to see responsible wolf management, we need to do better, because right now we're harming ourselves.
Well, and even with that guy, I mean, he's a hunter. He's not a hunter.
He's a piece of shit.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think the problem you have with some of it is, it's easy to say, well, that person doesn't represent, let's say, hunting values, right? But the fact of the matter is that, there's a lot of folks who share similar sentiments, and they actually shared in some of the articles about that guy. People were actually supporting what he did and saying, telling, I'll grab the duct tape next time. And they have, so there's, and I think that's the kind of stuff where there is a culture, and I'm not saying that this is all hunters. It certainly isn't, but there is a subset that's very loud that publicly shares the stuff we get on our social media all the time. People saying all sorts of horrible stuff about wolves, what they would love to do them, how they're worthless, they have no value, they would love to just, all sorts of terrible stuff. And that's prevalent. I mean, and I think that's the one challenge, is that doesn't help any productive discussion in any regard, because the reality is you have a lot of folks who are maybe, let's say, in the middle, even though the debate is somewhat polarized, and wolves, like all of our natural resources, belong to everybody. And ideally, whatever is done to them, management wise or not, should reflect what most people want. Right. Mm-hmm. And a good way to make sure that you don't get people on your perspective is to do things that make people disgusted. And, and I think one of the challenges with the wolf spectrum is you kind of have people view it as like you have the wolf lovers, which is a term of derision by some hunting people. And then you have the wolf haters, right? And there are a lot of people in the middle, but those aren't the people that you hear, right? You don't hear those people discussing. And there's people in the middle who might be, let's say, less inclined to hunt wolves, and some that might be more, and they might be able to have an amicable discussion, but you don't hear those amicable discussions. What you hear are both sides yelling at each other, calling each other morons and all sorts of awful stuff. And I think that's one of the most discouraging things, and it kind of highlights our society at large, is like, we can't even have productive discussions about, okay, that's what you value. I value something different. Okay, like, is there any middle ground, or can we come to some sort of arrangement? And I think there's just utter sort of hatred for people that are not from their perspective, and that never helps anything.
Yeah.
And I think one thing and this isn't science related at all, it's values, but just seeing people being able to have discussions that are honest, be able to disagree and say, like, I disagree with that person, but I still like them. Like, or they're not a horrible person because they want to hunt wolves or they don't want to. Like, I know a lot of people who are wolf advocates who are really great people and who aren't for hunting. And I know people who are hunters who want wolf management, and they're really great people. And I also know people on both sides that are also not very pleasant and, kind of pretty out there. So it would be nice if there was a way to sort of tone things down and have
meet in the middle
and have better discussions about things.
Yeah. Well, we're working on it. We're trying to build a coalition of some legislators and some key stakeholders to really sit down and try to hash this issue out. So
sure,
we'll see if that can happen.
Right.
Yeah. And I think one of the big things, especially if we're talking about wolf management, is probably, I think would do a lot of good, is we hear a lot of issues, right? Why people want to, let's say we need to hunt wolves because we got to help the deer, right? And that's sort of like the linchpin argument you often hear from a lot of hunting groups, right? And that's, and if that argument falls apart, it's like, okay, well, now we have no good reason. But the funny thing is, we think about all the other animals that are, let's say, hunted or trapped in Minnesota. You don't hear that. I don't hear anyone saying we got to hunt the fishers because they're eating all the voles, or we got to hunt the foxes because they're eating all the rabbits. But nonetheless, we have management. No one thinks that foxes are getting decimated. No one thinks that fishers are getting killed at numbers they shouldn't be, right? And so there's something about wolves that's really fascinating. And this is where we get the most heat, is saying, looking at the data, we don't see a lot of patterns indicating that wolves are the primary cause of decline. Now, for me, that doesn't signal that, okay, we've just dealt a devastating blow to wolf management. But to a lot of people, that is like we're taking a stance. And I do think it would behoove the discussion to sort of maybe think about things a bit more of like, okay, even if wolves aren't impacting the deer, probably wouldn't change some people's perspectives. So let's just be honest about our values. Some people think every species can be harvested in a sustainable way. Yep. Some people don't like that. Okay, but those are values, as opposed to arguing, well, does the science say that the wolves are going after the deer or not? Which is how we hear. And then it's just people yelling at each other.
Right. Yeah, well, and that's always my take on it too. I think the example you just gave was the fishers are decimating the voles, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if we started, we already can harvest fishers, right? Mm-hmm. Has anyone heard anything about, from the pro fisher side of the issue? Is anybody out there trying to save the fisher?
Not to my knowledge.
No. And so that's my biggest issue, is we have these charismatic creatures like the gray wolf, like the giant panda, that have this, I don't love this term, but almost cult-like following, right?
Yeah.
And I would say cult-like on both sides, ironically.
Exactly. Yes. No, I would agree. I would agree. But it's this animal that is so highly regarded that you can't get beyond that initial point of conversation.
Yeah.
You bring it up and it's, oh my God, I love wolves.
Right.
Or it's
that emotional spike.
Right. Or it's, well, they're well beyond their target recovery number and we should probably start harvesting them like every other species. But you can't get beyond that because they're just one of those iconic animals, So how do we get past that?
Well, then you have both sides to where they're above that number, just like you said. So we need to start harvesting them. But then you have people on the other side of the harvest number that not necessarily wants to harvest them, but just annihilate them, even though they may come around at some point and say, well, they need to be managed because they weren't getting any stronghold by saying, kill them all. And then you've got the other side that says we don't want them harvested at all because that would be killing them. Mm-hmm. Well, but again, with pro-wolf management, everything needs to be managed. But there are the two sides to that, which is sad to say that it's definitely two-sided.
Well, it's three-sided.
Three-sided,
right?
yeah.
It's the people that are all in. We want to see wolves thrive in everywhere, right? We don't want to see another wolf harvested in the state of Minnesota. And then it's the people that say we want to see a reasonable, sustainable harvest, right? And then what you're alluding to is this other fringe that's on the same side of the argument, but it's just gone so far to the extreme that is just anti-wolf. They want them gone. Well, I will never stand behind that statement. Wolves belong here. There's all this talk online right now about wolves being reintroduced in Colorado. And one just, they just had their first confirmed calf that was taken by a wolf. I said this last time, I'm probably going to get shot for saying this. I'm glad wolves are back in Colorado. They belong there. They just need to be held within a reasonable population level.
Yep.
But wolves belong on that landscape. They're an apex predator that landscape needs for ecological sustainability. I hope they don't get out of control.
One of the thing is it sucks that it, had predation on a calf, but wolves are going to do what wolves are going to do.
Right.
I mean, it just so happened that, the calf was available at that time.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. But and that's what I love about these pictures of, the deer, the deer kills and stuff like that. And everybody freaks out, they killed a deer in my backyard. It's because that's where the deer was.
Yep.
That's where the wolves had to go to get that deer so they could eat. Wolves are going to do what wolves are going to do. They're a predator.
Yeah. I mean, if wolves were extirpated from the state of Michigan, do you think there'd be an effort to reintroduce deer Did I say wolves?
You said wolves.
Sorry. If deer were extirpated from the state of Michigan, do you think there'd be an effort to reintroduce deer in Michigan?
Oh, 100%.
And that should happen because they belong there.
And then
that's
as soon
part
as they
of the circle of life.
And as soon as they
Thank
eat
you, Lion King.
Susie's apples, we got to get rid of the deer. Because deer are going to do what deer do.
Right.
You know, what I was also going to say just about the photos things that I find pretty humorous is, you know, okay, so you get rid of wolves because people think, oh, if this wolf ate this deer and how horrible of a death. Well, you get rid of the wolf. Well, how else is that deer going to die?
Right.
Because then let's see some photos of that. It'll die of starvation or disease. And I guarantee both of those deaths will be far longer and more probably unpleasant. I'm not saying getting eaten alive. I mean, there's no good way to die. Probably the best way as a deer is to get hit by a car and you're just done, right? But I think it's sort of
a buddy fall off a cliff. That seems like a pretty cool way to go.
I'd make it into sausage.
That's one way. But I do think it's one of those things where those things are meant to sort of generate, let's say, emotional responses. But then it's like, well, what's the alternative? Like deer don't just magically like, oh, they were sleeping and they just went to bed and they never woke up. Like, life isn't pleasant, and that's true of wolves as well. I mean, I think that's one argument you hear from folks who like hunting and they want those sort of activities is, okay, well, me shooting an animal is probably a better death than maybe how else they might die, which may or may not have merit. I do also think, though, and this is where, and I'm totally understand if I disagree with you guys about this, but I don't think that the idea that wolves that there's too many, I think is it's really a social construct as opposed to a biological one. Like we have as many wolves in the state of Minnesota as there is food to support those many wolves and as much habitat. And the same things with deer. Now we might say there's more than we would want and there's having an undue impact. I mean, we can say this with deer, right? We have created lots of agricultural habitat in areas of southern Minnesota, southern Michigan, and deer cause lots of issues. So they're at a higher level than we want socially. But it's not because there's more deer than like they're overpopulated in a biological sense. They are exactly where this landscape can support them. We might say that's not ideal for what we want to do.
Right.
My perspective, particularly with wolves, is in most of the areas where you have wolves, you don't actually, those impacts on humans are very minimal. Like the average person living in northern Minnesota, I live in northern Minnesota, you guys live in northern Minnesota, on a day-to-day basis, my life is not impacted. I live at the intersection of 3 different wolf packs. And yeah, I have to be a little careful if I'm walking my dog. And there's always the possibility that something could happen. But I don't, when folks say, oh, we have to keep them down. Well, first of all, I don't think actually we're going to do that biologically because we don't kill enough. And that's a whole other discussion. But I also just don't think like getting them to a certain level. It's like the wolves are going to continually come up to where the food sustains them. And we're not going to change it. So unless we change the amount of food on the landscape, which is changing the number of deer, I don't think you're going to see much of a change in wolf populations, even if you manage them. That doesn't mean you can't manage them. Like when we people hunt deer, and I don't generally hear hunters out in Minnesota saying, let's lower the deer population this deer season, right? They hunt them with the understanding that impact in a regulated sense isn't going to change the number of deer available the following year, right? And for some reason, and my point with this sort is just like when we think about management, sometimes folks think of wolves as like they're this totally different species, but really management is not dissimilar to how we manage other species, right? Where there's a certain amount that could be harvested, the population can compensate for that, and the next year you have that same number or maybe more because there's still enough habitat, food, et cetera, that can support that number or more. Right. And I think that's the case with wolves.
Well, and we've got the wolf plan now, that sets that range between 2,200 and 3,000 wolves.
Sure.
And we are at the upper end of that target population. So if we're going to stick within the wolf plan, it's time to start a modest harvest at least. Would be
I would say it depends on your interpretation. And
that is my interpretation.
And that's fine. And I'm not saying this is like taking a stance. I just think based on my understanding of the wolf plan, right, that is an option, right, of management. And there's obviously the option of no management. Certainly they laid out, I think it was 10 to 20% harvest in the range the population's at, right? And I suspect the reason why is because wolf populations a lot of work has shown that they can sustain that level of harvesting and remain at the same level.
Correct. Yes.
And this is, again, kind of coming back full circle to the idea of I think if you want to talk about middle ground, right, a lot of, from the hunting community, what you hear a lot of is we got to start shooting them, hunting them so we can drop their population. and that obviously triggers a lot of ire on the other side that say, we want that number of wolves. That's what we like. We want them around. I think the discussion would be a lot different if it's like, hey, we want to harvest wolves because we can sustainably. And we're also interested in keeping the population pretty stable at that level too. I think you'd have a lot of people think about that a lot differently than we're going to get rid of the wolves so we can help the deer, even though there's not a ton of evidence that that's going to do anything for the deer. And then it starts this sort of cycle. And again, in my perspective, that's not taking a pro or anti wolf hunting stance. It's just kind of like looking at the data.
I think that speaks to how you stay to the middle, because the folks on the other side are saying the exact opposite, in that if we have even a modest wolf hunt, we're going to decimate the wolf population, and they're going to be, back on the verge of extinction or extirpation in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't think that's the case.
Right.
We can even look at just, let's say the number of wolves that are removed for depredations every year in the state. Clearly, it's about on an average 150, 200 wolves are removed for causing livestock issues every year.
Yep.
And that's been the case for a decade at least. And populations remain pretty stable. Yep. And I think it kind of cuts both ways, right? And I think that's the challenge, right? Is there's a lot about that shown that the research that shows, yes, we can sustainably hunt and trap wolves, right? And the population will remain relatively stable. But it also shows that hunting and trapping wolves doesn't really change population size. And so the idea that, we're going to hunt wolves to help, let's say, the deer, is also a pretty weak argument, I think, biologically. Yeah. And so that's where I come through. And I understand that people might have different perspectives, but just looking at the data, I have yet to see any convincing evidence that says, yes, if we start hunting wolves, I'd say at a sustainable level, that's going to really make much of an impact.
Right. And so let's put population size aside.
Mm-hmm.
Would hunting wolves again change wolf behavior in a way that would affect human wolf conflict? Like, would they redevelop a fear of humans?
So I doubt you'd see any change, in part because I think most wolves already, there's the sentiment that, wolves aren't experiencing, they've lost their fear because they're not getting shot. Well, I'd say let's think about this on a practical level. Just think about it mechanistically. A wolf is in the woods. It gets shot. How do the other wolves know, oh my gosh, a human shot that wolf? Really think about it. How do they know?
Well,
right?
Dean's shooting at the wolf, he missed.
There's a
and
lot
now
of
it's scared
shots.
us.
And so I think just on a practical level, it's you have to think about, okay, how does that knowledge get transmitted? You're assuming almost a super animal-like quality to wolves in those instances, right? Where they somehow get this understanding from a small proportion of them getting removed. And also assuming that because we've now that they've not been under that kind of pressure right now. And again, we've had, let's say on average, 200-ish wolves removed by wildlife services for depredations. That's almost 10% of the population annually, right? So 1 out of every 10 wolves or so is getting killed already, right?
Supposedly.
Oh,
don't be going concrete on us.
Those government numbers are made up.
We got 30,000 wolves.
30,000. That's not 1%.
That's right. And so then I think you also think about too, we know there's wolves that are poached. And that's probably not an uncommon occurrence as well. And so we can say from our work, I haven't done an assessment for a while, but I'm guessing somewhere between the 5 to 10% are probably illegally shot. We have wolves that get that, and those are the ones that are killed. You can imagine there's lots of stories of wolves that die later, and then they do necropsies and find lead fragments in them and things like that. So I think the idea that wolves have lost their fear of people and now we're going to instill that through hunting and trapping, I think is kind of bogus in some sense. And I say this as someone who spends a lot of days in the woods from April to October. I've had a lot of close wolf encounters and a lot of days with no wolf encounters. And it's easy to look at one observation and say, see, they've lost their fear, right? And that taken out of context, I think, can make it look like there's an issue when there's really not any. I don't hear people saying with a lot of other species that we don't, let's say, hunt, say, they've lost their fear. Do you hear people saying with, I'm trying to think, let's say, lynx. Do you hear people saying, well, that lynx stood there, just stared at me? And lynx do this a lot, right? They'll just sit and watch you. But no one's sitting there saying that the lynx is going to attack them. And we haven't had...
Yeah, but we hear about, I'm a trout fisherman. Right?
Sure.
We hear about high pressure trout. You got to be perfect if you're going to catch trout that get a lot of pressure.
Sure.
Right. So they do spook a little easier. But
some do. I would really need to see some evidence that supports that, because in an area where we have a lot of high density, let's say wolves, we don't ultimately see that many issues where wolves are showing, let's say, no fear, right? At most, maybe an incident or two, but it isn't like, I mean, with the number of wolves we have, you should have issues all the time because they're around people all the time from our collar data, and yet we don't see that. So I would just need to see a lot more compelling evidence than, hey, someone has their flip phone and some wolf was doing something that looked like they didn't seem to care about that person. Yeah. Okay, that is interesting. Does it happen all the time? Not really. So,
well, couldn't it be a learned behavior though?
Some could be, and there are legitimate instances where wolves do get habituated to people, and that is a concern. And those animals, I don't think there's any way you can change that behavior, and they should be removed, in my opinion. Okay. And a lot of times that happens from people feeding wolves. Right. And we've had this in our area happen, where this happened 2 years ago. There was a wolf on the side of the road, and it was hanging out there all the time. And we put on our social media photos, someone had shared, and this wolf really didn't show, I would say, fear. And told people not to feed it. Well, guess what? People start throwing food on. Someone on our project watched people throwing food, and this wolf was approaching cars and doing things. That is not normal behavior, and that should be a problem. One incident, though, of a wolf standing on the edge of a road, not seeming concerned, is not, to me, evidence of that wolf has lost its fear.
Right.
Well, I mean, the same can be said about bears, and springtime when they put out bird seed. Mm-hmm. I feed the birds in my yard, and I've got a bird feeder, and, there's times when I start seeing bears come around, I'll feed, less bird seed, but I've had them on my front porch, right to my front door. Are they not afraid of people? I don't think that's the case. I think they're just...
They have other motivations.
They're hungry and they're inquisitive, and they're like, hey, what's this? Yeah. This kind of a cool porch. I'd like to hang out on it. I mean, I hang out on it too, so why wouldn't a bear?
And I think that's a great example, because bears are harvested every year in Minnesota, and we still see those incidences that are happening. And it's probably because that's what bears do. They're kind of curious. Right. They want to see things. When things are novel or interesting, they're going to be sitting there and they're going to kind of like, or if there's food involved.
Right. And I've stepped out the door and hollered at them. They take off. 10 feet away at the bottom of the steps, I holler at him or her, and it takes off. So, I mean, there's no difference.
Right. Sure.
Well, and kind of going back to what you were saying before about, the federal trappers, they don't like to be called that. Wildlife Services. Coming in, as well as people illegally harvesting wolves. Illegally poaching wolves. Let's call it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And not really seeing a difference. And that's kind of inevitably where every conversation I have on this issue brings us is back to an economic issue of us spending taxpayer dollars for wildlife services to come in and do this work that otherwise Minnesota could be turning a profit on to go back to habitat and wildlife conservation should there be license sales. Mm-hmm. And we could eliminate a significant amount of illegal activity through poaching of wolves. So I don't know if you have a counter argument to that or agree with that.
So I think there's two things. The one is, and this is one thing that I think is, I can totally understand as someone who's a rancher has, let's say, problems with wolves that are going after your livestock and not being able to deal with that problem immediately. And as we work with a rancher in our area who's had just lots of wolf problems for a long time, and can understand the frustration of not being able to do that. And this isn't having anything to do with being listed or not. I just think that seems pretty reasonable that ranchers would be able to, let's say, remove an animal that's going after their livestock or that they view as to being an imminent threat. But that's, I think, really different than the idea that, okay, if we have a limited wolf hunting season or trapping season, that's going to somehow markedly decrease the amount that we're going to have to spend on depredations. And you can see that even in the wolf hunting seasons that we had, there was a little decrease in depredations, but we still had issues and there's still wolf problems. And I think the other thing that's interesting, right, is if we look at it, let's just zoom back big picture. If we look at just animals, right, deer cause far more problems and cost economically than wolves do.
Shut your mouth.
and I think this is, and this is where I just think as someone who you look at the data, it's like, it just seems extremely, and I don't mean this, I like deer hunters. A lot of people are great people, but it's very, in my opinion, sort of hypocritical to say wolves cause this damage, which we can quantify, and it is quantified, which is in a couple $100,000 maybe a year, when we know economically deer are causing literally millions of dollars, and their crop damage alone, the DNR doesn't have enough funding to deal with it, and that surpasses what wolves do. And yet I don't hear, and I'm not saying you should do this, but I don't hear deer hunting organizations saying, yeah, let's go lower the deer population, right? That would be.
Well, we're not going to do that.
I know.
I try every year.
I know. But my point is, and I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying, like, if we're looking at these things, if that's really the concern, limiting the impact on human society, there is a lot of animals that we can focus on before wolves that will have a much more meaningful impact for a lot larger number of people in the state.
I agree. But in the state of Minnesota, wolves are the only species that we can't do that for. I mean, I shouldn't say the only species, but the only species with a significant enough impact, right? And so why are they allowed that exception from the methods we apply everywhere else?
So I'd say two things. The first is obviously right now endangered species list has its limitations. I think once they came off of that, that's a whole other discussion, and how you limit and deal with the negative effects of certain wildlife is a whole other discussion. And that goes for just not only wolves, but other animals as well. And I'm not saying that therefore means that you can't have let's say a wolf hunting or trapping season. I just don't think there's a lot to suggest that's going to really resolve a lot of these issues long term. In part because, again, we're not going to really change wolf population size long term through the limited hunting and trapping season. And so and you kind of see this in the data, every year you're going to still have the same issues. They have issues in Manitoba, they have issues in Ontario, places where they have wolves established long term, and Idaho, all sorts of other places where they're trying to monitor. They still have problems in a lot of them. And they're paying lots of money to try to resolve it, and it doesn't resolve itself. And that's because the populations keep coming back up to where the carrying capacity naturally is in that landscape. Again, that doesn't mean you can't, let's say, hunt and trap them. It just means that to use that as an argument, in my opinion, is pretty weak logic given the data that exists.
Ouch.
But aren't you saying, though, in that same sentence that you could hunt and trap wolves and not really affect their population?
Oh, totally. I totally 100% believe that.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying is I don't think, and based on the data that's available, I don't see much to indicate that, yes, hunting and trapping seasons will have a substantial impact on wolf populations long term.
Now, is that future populations or current populations?
Like, I would say, well, the way I think about it is like, let's say you take 10% of the population out this year. Right. Next year, the population will be back up to what it was prior to what you took out. Because reproduction is going to account for that. In particular, you're going to see probably things like increased pup survival, decreased dispersal rates, and it's going to allow the population to compensate, which is the same reason why we can harvest, 100 and some thousand deer every year, and the deer population remains high or sometimes even increasing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because we're not removing a substantial enough proportion of the population.
Right.
And I think that's the same with wolves. And I think if you look at the Minnesota wolf management plan, that calls for like removing 10 to 20% potentially of the wolf population if they're delisted. And at that level isn't going to do much for wolf population levels.
So you, Tom Gable of Voyageurs Wolf Project, are on record advocating for a 60%.
100%.
I will say there's a clip on this podcast where Tom says, we do not kill enough wolves.
You can, if you edit it just right, you'll get what you're looking for.
Yeah. So I'm saying, please don't use that out of context. Okay.
Yes, we won't.
And no, that's fine. I mean, like I said, I think it's important. Like I said, from our perspective, like that'll make a lot of clearly people who don't want wolf hunting. It will make some folks that runs contrary to their perspective. But I also don't think it would be very honest to say that we don't know that, because there's been a lot of studies that have looked at it, and we can even see it again in Minnesota. There was 3 hunting seasons, and the wolf population remained relatively stable. Yep. There was a little decrease at first because the way wolf populations are measured is at the end of winter. Well, the season happened right before it. Right. So of course we're going to see a drop. But if we kind of account for the number of wolves that were removed and add that kind of into the initial population, it'd probably be pretty similar. So I do think that that's likely the case. And again, this is where, from my perspective, it's really coming back down to the values, not the science. And I think that's where I hear a lot of arguments, let's say, about their impacts on deer, livestock, and vice versa, impacts on social groups. And, if you hunt wolves, it's going to impact their social groups, for instance, right? And some of the advocacy uses some work that we were associated with publishing. And from my perspective, it's like, if we hunt wolves and you take out the parents of the pack, that's probably going to have an impact on the social group. That doesn't mean we can't do it. We do that with other animals all the time. I'm not saying that. So in my opinion, that doesn't provide evidence that, okay, we can't do it. It just means that this is what would happen if you take out the parent of a social group. The pack might split up. Doesn't mean the population is going to change a whole lot. And I think so getting back to this, I think there's a huge importance in qualifying where the edges of science are and then where our value discussions end up being.
So, Tom, I want to ask you about, there's some current legislation about the wolf count in Minnesota, about counting the entirety of the state and not just the historical wolf range. Do you think that would change the numbers in any way if they did that? And I don't even know how they would do that.
I don't. I didn't even know that was legislation. I'm sorry, I'm not up on
it's,
that sort of stuff.
Representative Schultz.
There's a couple of them now.
There's more than one
too.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
And so what's the goal? To basically just
it would be a mandatory annual survey statewide, rather than the current established wolf range.
And mandatory reporting when they kill people, I think, is in there. Seriously, I'm not even joking.
I didn't know that there wasn't
I would assume
reporting.
That would be reported anyway. But thank you for adding that,
they put
Congressman.
I think it's one was like periodically, the other one was like every quarter.
Every time a person's killed by a wolf, the news has to cover it.
I would think Tom would know that number.
Oh yeah, it's like 50 or 60 bucks
a day.
Oh,
yeah,
we got it.
Dang interns.
Right.
Keep going.
That's right.
I think that's why my wife's calling me right now as she's being attacked.
So I would say, I think, I don't know how aside from, I don't know how you study wolves in areas where, unless they're there, like the DNR right now, their method is, they collar wolves, they get territory sizes, they get pack count estimates, and then they estimate density. I don't know how you estimate the wolves if they don't exist there. Through that method, you could put out cameras, and that would be one way to monitor things. I think if you think about the number of trail cameras that are probably in southern Minnesota, where outside of wolf range, it's probably hundreds of thousands would be my guess, or tens of thousands at least. And there's not, at least on things like Wolf Report, you're not getting observations of a pack. And from our work that we've done, if wolves are in an area and you've got cameras out and there's enough people are going to get them on camera.
Right. Yeah.
And there's probably going to be problems as they move into agricultural areas as well. So, I guess like you can add that. I don't really know functionally what you would do different, because it's kind of like, how much evidence do you need that they're not there? That's really the question. It's the question of like, how do you prove a negative, right? I don't know. Like I guess you can say you did it, but I don't think it would change a whole lot.
Right.
Unless there's something going on that just, I don't know, there's some lapse and somehow people are not capturing something. I just find that hard to believe, though, because wolves have such a big home range that they're going to be covering so many people's areas. People would see them. They would see tracks. They'd see scat. They would get observation on their trail camera, on their Ring doorbells, who knows what.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't seem to be happening right now.
So maybe you'd pick up a couple wolves, but you're not really.
You probably would get some lone wolves that are probably wandering, like the one that went to Iowa,
right?
Likely probably meandered through Minnesota, I would imagine. Yeah. But, that's not going to, without it being a pack, the DNR already sort of accounts for the prevalence of lone wolves in the area.
Right.
And that wouldn't really provide much useful data, I don't think.
The Minnesota Deer Hunters Association has been building a hunting and conservation legacy over the past 40 plus years through habitat, education, advocacy, and legislation in Minnesota for Minnesota. All right, so Tom, we've been talking about, the wolf hunt and deer and everything. So what else do you guys have working on up there?
Sure. Yeah, so we're obviously interested in learning a lot more, if we can, about sort of wolf-deer interactions, as that's a big part of our study. Even before a lot of this sort of interest in the past year or so has really started kind of looking at what is the relationship between the two. So our hope is, if we can get funding, is to really look at the deer side of things. So we do a lot of work from the wolf side of things, where we collar wolves and we see what the wolves are doing. Yeah. But we haven't been able to follow deer because we don't have GPS collars on deer to understand their survival rates and how they're spending time, what kind of habitats they're spending on, or spending time on. And then also sort of how wolves are influencing the mortality of those deer, how that changes with different winter severity and things like that. So our next phase is hoping to get funding through the Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund so that we can understand some of these patterns. It seems like a sort of a really natural, logical progression in our work to try to understand that. And really, there's a lot of questions that we can only answer if we know what deer are doing. And so that's our hope as we move forward, is to incorporate that aspect into our work. And what's also interesting, too, is there was some preliminary work done by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources on the southern edge of our study area in a spot called the Elephant Lake Deer Yard, which is just south of where we're at. And they did some work in, I think it was 2018 to 2020. And they found that from the deer that they collared, there was a higher percentage of those deer died from wolf mortality than they had anticipated based on previous work. But it was a relatively short study, and there was a lot of questions that were left after that. And our hope is to kind of explore some of those patterns. They were looking particularly at deer in the deer yard, and we're interested in sort of getting north of that area, just seeing, generally speaking, with deer in our whole study area, what happens to those deer, especially when winter happens. And then also, one of the big questions we're interested in is, how is habitat playing a role in that? This is one of those things that kind of gets lost in a lot of these discussions about wolves and deer, is we assume it just comes down to how many wolves and how many deer. But habitat's really crucial, and there's a lot of management activities that probably actually reduce the good habitat for deer, in particular winter cover. There's a lot of logging in our area that is focused on promoting aspen regeneration. And aspen can provide a lot of good food for deer shortly after they've been logged, and the aspen stems are young and deer can reach them. But it only takes a couple of years before those aspens are really tall, and now there isn't food for those deer. And there's also no cover for a very long time. There's no conifers growing back, and deer need conifers to sort of get through the hard winters when there's deep snow. And so we're trying to understand, how does habitat play a role as well in some of these patterns we observe. And so we're interested in trying to understand that. And we think that'd be of use to a lot of people who are interested in that topic, both from the, pro-wolf management and not pro-wolf management side of things. And so we're hoping that provides a useful piece of information that at least gives people some information that they can use to discuss what they value and things like that.
Yeah, well, and I'm proud to announce that we submitted a letter of support for that grant that they're working on. Because I think if we're going to make sound wildlife management decisions, that needs to be informed by solid scientific evidence and data. And so the more data we can have to work with on the wolf deer population dynamics, as well as the habitat piece, we do a lot of habitat work as well. I think that's gonna benefit everyone, deer hunters, recreationists around the state. The more knowledge we have, the better we can utilize that knowledge to inform change.
And I think one of the big things we're interested in is, what really is good deer habitat, right? We kind of, people make assumptions about it. I hear a lot from landowners, we're going to log this area because that's going to create good deer habitat. But I think we have sort of looking at patterns, particularly where wolves spend time, because where wolves spend time is where the deer generally are going to be at, right? Yeah. And wolves don't spend a lot of time, particularly in the winter, in the areas that have been logged 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And oftentimes when you go there in the winter, there's also no deer tracks in those areas because it's deep snow and there's no food. And this might be a bit dramatic, but my hypothesis is that a lot of these areas that have been logged end up becoming sort of deer deserts. And we also log at a very quick rotation, and there's an increased demand for logging as time goes on. And we're really interested to understand sort of the intersection of sort of deer behavior and forest management practices, and saying, okay, not that we want to have an impact on logging, but maybe are there ways that we could, let's say, extract timber, but still leave good habitat that's good for deer during the winter time when they can get cover and things like that. And there are examples, like in the U.S. Forest Service, they manage their forests a lot different than, let's say, state land or things like that. And in particular, a lot more selective in their logging. And so maybe there's different ways that we can create forests, and maybe not all forests, but patches of habitat that are good for deer during the winter, which might increase their ability to, let's say, survive that year and go from there. Like this kind of study benefits everybody. And I hope that we can not only get funding for it, but then share that work as well through our social media platforms, groups like MDHA. One thing that we're really interested in, even though we're often accused of being a wolf advocacy group, is working with folks from a variety of different perspectives and backgrounds. And that includes people who are hunters and who enjoy doing those sort of activities. We certainly get a lot of support as well from folks who are more on the wolf advocacy side of things. That doesn't change how we do our work. And similarly, getting support from hunting organizations wouldn't change the way we do work either. But that to something to us is a positive thing, not a negative thing, to have a wide range of people who say we want to support good work, even and regardless of kind of what those conclusions are, because we trust that that work's being done to a high quality. And that's why we are really happy to have a group like MDHA support it. And we're looking forward to kind of hopefully getting it funded and sharing work as we go forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, knowledge benefits everyone.
Absolutely.
In and of itself. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, that's a controversial statement.
Yeah,
but
it really is.
Knowledge is a benefit to
So
everyone.
if you get that grant,
Yep.
does that mean you're going to have those sweet maps for deer too?
Hey, we might. I mean, I think what it would really be awesome, right, is if we could get movements of deer and then also get movements of wolves where you have
superimpose
and have them and kind of see how are deer navigating that risk. There's been work in northern Minnesota over by the Ely area a while back prior to kind of GPS collar technology, but they were able to estimate that they think deer are encountering wolves pretty frequently on a day-to-day basis, right? So there's kind of this idea, and we hear from the hunting community of, wolves came by, there's not going to be any deer there. The wolves are scared it by. But a lot of the work actually shows, given how much wolves travel, that most deer are probably encountering wolves fairly regularly just because wolves are constantly moving and deer aren't. And so wolves are constantly going through deer territories. So we would think it would be really fascinating to look at some of these dynamics at a really fine scale and hopefully have a map and say, okay, this is where the deer was, this is where the wolf was, and maybe it killed the deer, and most times it probably didn't kill the deer, and try to understand those interactions.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
We had an interaction on deer opener.
Yeah.
We had a wolf come through on the trail cam at 3:40 in the morning.
Something like that.
Wolf came through. Doe came through at 4:30. I mean, 45 minutes, it might have been an hour. I don't remember the exact times, but within an hour, a deer came through the same path.
Yeah.
So,
and I would generally say, I mean, I would actually, this is, some people get upset about this, but the fact that wolves are in an area regularly is usually not an indication that there's no deer, but rather that there's deer present, right? Because like any other animal, they go where the food is. They're not going to spend time hanging out where there's no food. And we see this with the collar data, particularly in the winter time, because deer in the winter are congregated in certain habitats. And oftentimes wolves will hang out in those areas where there's deer. And so when folks say, oh, there's a lot of wolves around, it's like, well, then there probably is a lot of deer around, because they're not going to sit there if there's no food. But I know that's a controversial
we need to repeat
concept.
that for the people in the back. Make that a little bit louder. So obviously, we've touched on social media hate. I'm sure you guys, just as well as us, as MDHA, we get our own fair share. I'm sure you guys get just as much.
Absolutely.
If not worse. Because you guys post quite a bit and whatnot. So,
yeah, we get a lot of, we have a lot, by and large, most people are very pleasant. I think it's hard not to focus on the comments that are really unpleasant, because those are the ones you remember because they're just oftentimes so unpleasant. I think one thing we've tried to make sure on our project is that we don't change the kind of information we share based on how much people do or don't like what we have to say, how much it, conforms to their perspective. And we share some stuff that offends people on both sides, or at least offends their perspective. Not because we're trying to offend them, but because we think, hey, this is what the information shows, and we're going to share that information, and we're not going to just show one perspective because that makes you happy. So for instance, this winter we were doing a lot of work studying wolf predation and wolf predation on deer. And so we had some people who were really upset that we were sharing information, showing these kind of bloody images of predation events. And because it made wolves look bad, right? And our perspective is like, that's what wolves do. We're not going to not show that because that makes them look better, right? And we're not going to provide a sterile sort of image of, they only do nice cuddly things. Now, we also show the cuddly aspects when they have young pups, and young pups are cute, and everyone likes those kinds of photos. Even if you don't like wolves, there's just no way you can't see a young little wolf pup and say, okay, that isn't kind of cute. Yeah. And we get accused then of, you're just trying to gin up support from the wolf lovers, right? And that's not the case. We're trying to show a realistic perspective of what wolves are like. Yes, they're social animals. Yes, they have bonds. They have offspring. And you know what? They're beautiful animals. And I'm totally okay with saying that. And they also do things that are quite sometimes hard to stomach because they're kind of gruesome. Like we see it all the time doing our work day in, day out. They eat animals alive to live. Yeah. We didn't make wolves that way, but that's what they do. And we're not going to say, well, we don't want to show that because that makes people uncomfortable. We want to really show an honest perspective of what they do. And then aside from that, then things devolve quickly into all sorts of people accusing us of all sorts of things that, we're in the, when we got some funding from a chapter of the MBHA a while back, we were accused of being in bed with the hunters. And I could still find the messages we got from people who were adamantly convinced that we were a pro hunting group that was masquerading as biologists, and had people very upset about that. And then recently, of course, we've become now wolf advocates because looking at the patterns we see between wolf and deer populations, we don't see a real evidence showing that wolves are the primary factor driving deer population changes. So now we're wolf advocates. And in our perspective, we're neither. We're just trying to say what the data is showing us. And folks are welcome to present other data that contradicts what we're saying. But I think oftentimes what it is it just becomes personal attacks, or I wouldn't say personal, but project attacks, as opposed to actually presenting some argument that actually refutes what we're saying on a data level. And if someone comes up with data that says, hey, I've got strong data that shows your perspective is incorrect, okay, we're happy to look at that and consider it. We're not always right, but we're trying our best to get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and that's the nature of science, right?
Absolutely.
I used to teach elementary science, and I would teach day one. Science is not a knowledge base. It's a process, right? It's a process you go through. It's ever evolving, and it's going to change as we gain more information.
And I think that's a really important too when we're thinking about wildlife management in particular, and the way wildlife populations work, right? Is people sometimes almost want to view science through a almost quasi-religious perspective, where it's that's what the science says, it's absolute truth. Yeah. And like Jared said, it's not absolute truth. It is our best understanding of the way things work at that moment. And that can adapt and change through time. We have evidence of this pattern today, but in light of new evidence, maybe we revise that perspective. It doesn't mean that we were being, let's say, deceptive at this one point. We were at that time saying, hey, that's how we thought it worked. And we've had moments, I've had moments in our own work on things that are very inconsequential, where I thought, hey, this is, and particularly with how wolves hunt and kill beavers, where I thought this is how it works. And then we got more data, and actually, no, I was wrong with that, or that was a bad assumption. That's just normal.
So
and
science is always evolving.
It is always evolving.
Data.
And I think the only negative is some people then say, well, therefore it's always evolving, so you can't trust any of it.
Right. Yep,
and I think that's a poor way to view it. It's yeah, we might learn new information, but at this moment, that's the best information we have, because all of a sudden you can evolve in this argument, well, we don't know anything about anything. And then so
hey,
it's just
gravity's just a theory.
Right. Right. So I think it's important to note, it's a way of knowing, and we're going to, you're going to update it as you get more information. But at that moment, that's your best understanding of the way that system works. And let's say like with wolves, people have studied wolves a lot. They've also studied deer quite a bit. So we have pretty good understanding of those patterns, right? So our perspectives might change a little bit, but it's not like we're going to studying some new species that no one's ever doesn't know anything about. Like we have a pretty good understanding of, generally speaking, how these populations change and move. There's things we're trying to refine our understanding of. But it's not like, well, they just don't know anything. They're just guessing.
You're not reinventing the wheel.
You're kind of building on previous work and saying, hey, and a lot of the work we do confirms stuff that's been done or touches on a lot of those themes. And some of that's work that MDHA has supported like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and like Glenn Delgides was doing deer research and things like that. And I think that's one of the beauties of it, right, is understanding like, hey, we can do work now, let's say 30 years later, and it shows similar patterns, or it provides some more nuance to patterns that we thought were simpler, but actually, okay, it gets a little bit more complex. And those are what makes actually doing the work fun. Unfortunately, sometimes it's used as a wedge in discussions, but actually that's what makes science so interesting, is the ability to say, yeah, we didn't get it right that time, or we kind of partially had it, but we didn't fully have it, because no one ever has perfect information. Yeah. So we have to do the best we can with what we have.
So how much are you selling the snake oil for?
Well, to the highest bidder's probably 20,000.
Nice.
To you though, we'll give a discount, $100.
Yeah. You know what the real conspiracy is? I woke up, I don't know, probably like 10, 11 days ago, and I see a picture on your guys' Facebook page of a damn cougar.
Oh, I saw that.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to share this. And I was like, and then all of a sudden,
I started reading
Bigfoot
it
in the background.
Yeah.
And I was like, that son of a, almost got me. I almost shared that.
I read the same thing.
But that's the best part.
Who paid you to do that?
So no, I do this. So every year, I love April Fools.
Had to be Reamer.
I love it because it highlights exactly in some sense, so I would say lunacy of social media, right, is what intentionally, right? This long post starts off real serious, right? And people don't even finish reading it. And then they start sharing it and whatever, right? And people say, it's leading to misinformation. It's like, okay, whatever. But it's so humorous to watch someone share it. They think, see, it proves exactly what I thought. There's a breeding population of cougars. And then they realize, oh, it's a joke. I literally got someone on Instagram who sent us a message and said, I'm so thankful for the work you guys are doing. Way to go. You're talking the truth, blah, blah, blah. And then about 5 minutes later goes, oh, I just finished reading it. Oops. Gosh.
I just saw
awesome. And I think like that, I just chuckle. And this happens we come up with some ridiculous story, but it kind of touches on some of the themes that people tell us, and people want to believe it. So they'll see a, crappy photoshopped image and believe it. And I think it's just, I have a lot of fun writing those.
I thought you guys were like a legitimate source of information until that.
Well, this is a good example, right? Is we have people who are, speaking of like online hate, people who then get upset that we share these jokes on, let's say, April Fools, because now we're leading to the misinformation, and people are going to believe that, and the hunters are going to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if someone wants to believe that, good for them, but I'm not going to like not have some fun with it just because a couple people might think some wacky ideas on an April Fool's post.
It was a hoot after I realized it was BS.
Yep, that's all it's.
It took me out, 20 seconds. Okay,
you got to the end, and then you realized.
I was like, "Oh man, I'm going to read this. I can't wait to share. This is awesome." And I was like, "Wait a second, that's a damn Bigfoot in the background."
Yep, I saw the same thing.
Damn it!
Yeah. So with that, I guess the other question is what we ask everybody. So, do you hunt?
I do. And I have since I shot my first deer when I was 12 with a bow. So that in Michigan, that's the youngest age you can hunt. And so I grew up in a family that almost everybody I know in my family, not almost everybody, but a majority of my family hunts, particularly a lot of the men in my family. But on my dad's side of the family, actually my grandparents who live where I grew up in Midland, Michigan, they're still alive. My grandma's 87. My grandpa's 91. Wow. And they both hunt. My grandma's an avid deer hunter. Cool. Avid. I'm not talking about like she's out there all the time. And so a lot of my experience growing up was going out to our family's sort of deer camp in that area and property we owned and hunting. So I started with my dad and sitting in the blind with him, where we shot deer. And then obviously I started hunting myself, archery, and learning as a young kid. how to do all of that. And that just kind of persisted all the way through college. And that was really one of the things that got me into the sort of wildlife field, is just spending that time outside, because I enjoy doing those sort of things, and grew up in a family of people where that's what people did. And so I really enjoy that. And I'm hoping this year, my grandparents are still alive, so I'm probably going to go back to Michigan for deer season there, just to have another season, because it's been a while since I'm able to get back with work and things like that. So that's been a really sort of an informative thing for me growing up.
Awesome.
And so I've done quite a bit of that. In Michigan, deer hunting is a bit different. There's no shortage of deer in Michigan where we're at in the Lower Peninsula. So, it was more like, could you see a buck that was big enough that you would shoot, as opposed to like, are you going to see a deer? And there's also baiting there. So, you would sit there and it would not be uncommon to have 20 does, parked.
You could bait in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of the rules might have changed recent years with CWD stuff, but when I was hunting there primarily and living there, you could bait, and like I said, you just have deer parked in front of your stand, and then it would be like, oh, is there a buck that's going to come in? There's a lot of bucks that are pretty small. There's not a lot of nice bucks. Like up in our area in Voyageurs, I've certainly seen on trail cameras a lot nicer bucks on average than you see there, but there's a lot fewer of them.
The Minnesota Deer Hunters Association has been building our hunting and conservation legacy over the past 40 plus years through habitat, education, advocacy, and legislation in Minnesota for Minnesota.
And I've even seen like Steve Rennell has done stuff of like, why does he hunt? What is the motivation or impetus behind that? And it's kind of a strange thing. It's like something that's almost, you can hardly describe it, right? But you can feel it if you do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I felt with some of the work that we did. But yeah, obviously I have a job that gives me the ability now to do that for a research way. And in some sense that feels more productive too, because we get a lot of information from doing it too.
Yeah. Well, and if for all of our listeners, if you haven't seen it yet, Steve Rennella put out I guess it's a documentary called Stars in the Sky.
Oh yeah, that's good one.
Netflix.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's a story about why we hunt, and I recommend that to everyone. So that's worth a 1 month Netflix subscription.
Oh, for sure. I love Steve.
Exactly.
He's actually from Michigan too. So
he is?
Yeah, he's from Michigan.
A lot of the best people are.
A lot of the best people are. Says the friend of the serial killer.
So you said you're a bow hunter.
Yep.
We always have to ask. So what do you shoot for a bow?
Oh gosh. So I haven't shot a bow. I'll be honest. I haven't shot a bow for a long time. So when I first started, I shot a deer with a bow when I was 12, and then I shot another one when I was 14. And then I stopped bow hunting. When I was in high school, my interest in, let's say, hunting waxed and waned. So I haven't shot a bow in a long time. In part because I've also, once I got out of high school, I was in college, we came back and I mainly did rifle hunting at that point, because that fit better with doing college work, because you could just come back for opening sort of day and a couple days after that. And then that was that, or maybe come back for muzzle loading. Yeah. And then I moved up to Voyageurs, and frankly, we've been so busy with our work, like our field season ends right when deer hunting season starts. And in part because we want to be out of the woods before people are hunting. Yeah. And at that point, we've been in the field so much that I generally am like, I don't really care if I go hunting this year, because I've had a lot of outdoor time. Where I know is for most people, it's like they've not had a lot of outdoor time, and that's their outdoor time. So I haven't done a lot of hunting recently, just because, I'm in the field basically 7 months in a row. And that's, especially when it starts getting cold and unpleasant, I'm kind of like, I'm okay to sit inside.
Yeah, but there's no bugs.
And the other thing too is, I know a lot of folks hunt for venison. Well, I have no problem getting venison, because all I have to do is talk to my dad back in Michigan or something. There you can get doe permits up the wazoo. He'll shoot deer out of our pole barn outside of our house, because there are just so many of them, and you can get unlimited permits. So anyways, getting like venison to eat isn't really an issue. Whereas I know for some folks who are hunting in northern Minnesota, they've got to get their deer if they want to have venison or something like that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So if you were to shoot a rifle, what caliber would you shoot?
6.5 Creed.
No, don't say
6.5 Creed.
I was going to say 30-06. That was the last rifle that I've got a deer with. So
you don't think that's overkill for Minnesota? Because I've got one.
That's just enough.
I've got one, but I use that for long distance elk hunting out west.
It just depends on your perspective, I suppose. So
that's like saying you're wrong.
That's
everyone's opinions are valuable.
Well, I like that.
Except for Jared.
All right. Fair enough.
Fair enough. All right.
I did shoot the 6.5. It was decent.
I did. It was very nice.
I didn't hit a damn thing with it, but it was decent shooting.
I didn't miss with it.
You did pretty good with it.
Yeah, you did
Video
really well.
evidence of it.
Yep.
Actually, Dean was right behind you shooting a 2.23 the whole time. You didn't hit it.
We got video evidence of that too. Well, Tom, it has been great. We appreciate all your information. I mean,
Absolutely.
This has got to be one of the best one we've done.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
It's
I've
been
really
fun.
enjoyed it.
Sure,
Very
absolutely.
informative. You said a lot of big words that I don't understand.
Right.
I'm still actually Googling them
Right.
and
From the
trying to
first
figure out
20
how
minutes.
to spell them. And then the kilometers to miles, and I'm baffled. But
Right.
you know,
Grandma and Grandpa Gable
Yep.
want you on the show. Sounds like you're legit
Yes,
whitetail
that would be
hunters.
cool.
Hey, if I showed you, I've got some photos. They're pretty. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Particularly the fact that they're both still alive, and the fact that they both hunt. And it's
I would love to.
they are. Yeah, they've been. So when I grew up, we actually went for when I was in 5th grade. I was really fortunate that we went to Newfoundland. My dad and my grandparents, myself, we went moose hunting. I actually showed Jared when I met him. I've got a photo when I was younger sitting on a bull moose that my dad shot. Awesome. And we had to pack out the moose and things like that. And those are from those experiences when you're 5th grade, you don't really appreciate how cool that is. You're just like, oh, I guess it's just what people do. Right. Mm-hmm. And I wish now it's like one of those moments I look at the old photos. I hardly remember a lot of it. And you're like, man, I wish I could go back to that moment. Cause I remember also too, I went out caribou hunting with my grandpa at that time, right? And it was just one of these kind of cool moments. I have little snippets of memories of that. So yeah, those things are really foundational in how you kind of think about spending time in the outdoors. Yeah. And it's amazing. Like I said, if you met my grandpa, he's 91 and jazzed to go hunting.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah,
that's
great.
Awesome.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tom.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for coming down and visiting with us. Thanks, Jared, for attending another one. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate it, Jimmy.
Fun. Yeah, I'm not going to say thank you.
I know. You never do. You never do. So
thanks for coming here, guys, except for Dean.
Yeah, exactly. So next episode might just be a recap of Kansas since we haven't done that yet.
All right.
So hopefully next week or sometime we'll do that. And I don't know where the future will take us.
Well, maybe Tom will come back again.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd love to come back. Yeah, that's
all right.
It's been
Next
fun.
week you heard him, guys.
It'll be our new visitor all the time.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, we'll make room for a cot for you too.
Yeah,
Boom.
there we go. We'll have to get bunk cots or something.
There you
go.
Right
yeah.
on.
So awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll
All right.
talk to you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Awesome. Bye.
The Minnesota Deer Hunters Association and Wolf Report proudly sponsor this podcast. However, please note that the opinions, topics, and guests featured may not necessarily align with the views, beliefs, goals, or mission of our sponsors.